Welcome to my channel. This is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 61. The cold wind roared, and a huge stone gate was embedded in the valley, blocking all the way up the mountain. Many people waited in front of the mountain gate, in groups of two, talking softly or closing their eyes to rest their minds. "Is it cold?" Xing asked. "What do you think?" Shen Li took down the fox fur cloak that he put on her, and put it in his arms. "You can put it on yourself. I think the temperature is just right. Those who come to this mountain to do business all know cultivation. Some are monsters who dominate one side, some are masters of the cultivating sex. Their bodies were hundreds of times stronger than ordinary people, but still, the cold in the mountain here was not the same as elsewhere. The wind and snow seemed to carry a bit of mana, which can pierce people's bones. Even magic barriers couldn't stop them. There is no need to avoid the cold here, which is indeed too eye-catching." Xingji took the fox fur and put it on himself, but Shen Li waited impatiently. She looked at the huge stone gate in front and asked, "Isn't it said that the door will open when it gets dark? The sun has already been set for a long time. Why not let people in?" Xingji looked at the sky. "It's probably the master, forget it." As soon as his voice fell, the firelight automatically lit on the mountain gate, and it opened inward with a creak. The stairs inside seemed to grow, the torches on both sides of the road were all lit by themselves, and the crowd slowly walked inside. Shen Li couldn't see the end of the long mountain road. She raised her eyebrows. "What is the origin of this snow mountain golden snake monster? It seems very eye-catching. Why haven't I heard of it before?" Xingji smiled. "This only means you don't put much thought in deals and trades." Xingji hesitates for a moment, then said, "This demon may be even older than me. So you must treat it as respecting your elders, even with all this pomp." Shen Li was a little surprised. "Older than you? Then it must be a demon from ancient times." Xingji heard what Shen Li said, his body stiffened. He turned his head slightly, frowning, staring at Shen Li's face for a long time. Shen Li was horrified by him and looked back. After finally confirming that Xingji was staring at her, Shen Li just wanted to ask him what was wrong, but suddenly realized that she just blurted out something that she shouldn't say. Shen Li pondered for a while and comforted, "I feel that for your age, you still look pretty good." That seemed to be the wrong words. Shen Li scratched her head. "She's good at killing people, but she is a little bit powerless to comfort people, I mean. Actually, looking at you, nobody would say how old you are." Seeing Xingji's eyebrows move, she sinks. Shi Li sighed. "Okay, I'm sorry I said the wrong thing." Sure enough, comforting people was not her strength. "Do you care about this?" he asked lightly after watching her for a long time. Shen Li waved her hand hurriedly. "I don't mind, of course, I don't mind." When she raised her head, she met his eyes that were holding a smile with the arc of the eyes slightly bent. His smart eyes had jumping flames in them, as he smiled straight at her. Shen Li's heart trembled, and her heartbeat was a bit turbulent. Xingji didn't bother anymore with the topic. "The mountain road is too long, you are injured, it is not suitable for climbing by yourself, I will carry you up." He stretched out his hand, but Shen Li was stunned for a long time. When she finally recovered, she staggered slightly. Taking a step back, how can this be done? I'll go this way by myself." As if he was expecting her to refuse, the hand that was offered remained there. "Then I will hold you." When Shen Li shook her head, he just grabbed her hand, and put Shen Li's hand straight into his palm, without looking at her a second time, with a very natural appearance. Shen Li was stunned, but she didn't think it would be so easy to withdraw her hand anymore. Xingji was acting like he cast a spell in their hands, making her unable to break free, so she just watches his back as she follows his footsteps. His hair gently brushed her cheek as they walked, and Shen Li felt that Xingji, before her eyes, was probably not the same as before. How can she draw a line between them with this kind of behavior? Ascending to the top of the mountain, the wind and snow were even worse, and the people who came to do business followed the guidance of torches and entered a palace-like hall. Shen Li also intended to do that, but as the crowd walked, his hand was holding her even tighter. He pointed to the weedy path and said, "Let's go there." Xingji was right. Sure enough, she couldn't walk 2 steps on this path. The scenery in front of her instantly flowed, and a glorious lake appeared on the top of this snow-covered hall. A very beautiful attic stood quietly in the center of the lake, and the mahogany and willow trees beside the building were so beautiful that they were a bit magical, like an illusion. With poo-poo sound, Shen Li looked down and saw a little girl crawling out of the ground. She stood up and patted the ash on her body. A tiny tail swayed back and forth behind her. "This is the owner's residence, no idlers can enter. I ask you to inform that High God Xingji came to visit." The little girl looked at Xingji for a long time, and suddenly became stiff. Her eyes glowed with blue light, her voice changed, like a seductive woman. "Oh, what kind of wind bring the god here?" Shen Li was startled by the child's changes. She became suspicious. Xingji just looked back at her, and calmly said, "It's all about a spiritual problem." "Oh, I see that God also brought a pretty girl to see my lady. Please come in, please come in." After saying that, the little girl waved her hand, and a path glowing with blue light appeared and extended to the center of the lake. Shen Li was surprised. "This golden snake demon is actually a woman?" she asked, stepping on the faint blue light, only to feel that the surrounding scenes changed in a blink of an eye, and she has already reached the center of the lake. "Why can't it be a woman?" A soft voice sounded in Shen Li's ears. Shen Li turned her head with a little surprise, and saw that a coquettish woman wearing a gorgeous red skirt and holding a fan was standing behind her. The woman smiled while looking at Shen Li. Shen Li thought the other person was too close, so she took a step back. The Lady Jean smiled, and her figure floated to Xingji's side. "This girl that High God brought is very guarded." Xingji just smiled. "In front of the Lady Jean, even I can't relax my guard. Someone prestigious as the High God, how can you say that the slave house? It's cold outside, let's go in and talk about it." After that, Lady Jean turned and entered the house. Xingji wanted to follow, but he was grabbed by Shen Li. Her brows frowned. "This person, is there no problem?" Xingji pondered the meaning of Shen Li's words, and asked with a smile, "Which kind of trouble are you talking about?" Shen Li replied solemnly, "Does she know how to use magic tricks, too, you know?" When Xingji heard the words, he lowered his head, and laughed as if he was too happy to control it. He patted Shen Li's head. "Don't worry, I won't be hooked away." These words were too intimate, and Shen Li's cheeks became red. Xingji caught a strand of Shen Li's hair and twisted, and whispered softly, "On the contrary, if she could use this kind of enchantment, I'm afraid I would be the person who had to worry." Although there was no brazier in the small building, the temperature in the house was much warmer. Xingji took out the fox fur and let the little girl who came take it away. Lady Jean sat down at the table. There was a game of chess on it. She beckoned to Shen Li. "Will the girl accompany the slave's family to the next game?" "Sorry lady, Shen Li's is too weak at chess, so I would prefer not to show my incompetence." Lady Jean pouted. Okay, then the god can play with me." Xingji smiled but didn't move, and Lady Jean gave up and put the chess pieces down. "Everyone that comes here wants something. So let's talk about it. High God has a problem and can't solve it by himself, so he came to ask for help from this slave. Can Lady Jean have a way to cure her? The pretty girl is sick. The Lady Jean walked slowly to Shen Li, and she looked at Shen Li up and down. Well, her complexion is weak, she must have been severely injured sometime before she came, but this injury has recovered and there should be no major problems. What do the gods want me to treat? She has not recovered her magic power, and her 5 senses disappear from time to time. Oh, this is a strange thing. The Lady Jean laughed and said, "Come on, girl, stretch out your hand to let the slave take the pulse." Shen Li stretched out her hand, and Lady Jean rolled up her sleeve, but when Lady Jean saw the hideous scar on Shen Li's wrist, she was slightly startled. It turns out that you've been hurt this much." Her fingers lightly touched the wrinkled flesh, but as soon as they touched, her fingers pulled back. The girl's skin is too hot. Is it hot? Shen Li was surprised. These days, she touched Xingji a lot, and he never showed any discomfort. She thought that her body was just a little hotter than usual, not as hot as before when she was in captivity, so she didn't expect it would still burn. If it was like this then. As she was thinking about it, a cloud of white gas condensed in Lady Jin's hand, and she dared to touch Shen Li's wrist. "If this hurts, this lady will blow on it for you." A gesture of coaxing the child. This banshee is teasing her. The corner of Shen Li's mouth twitched. "Thank you, it doesn't hurt anymore." The Lady Jean took her pulse seriously this time. Shen Li only felt a very fine breath entering her body from her wrist and walking slowly along the meridian, examining her whole body. While doing the examination, Lady Jean was still busy pursuing her mouth and complaining, "I haven't seen you for many years, but it seems that the High God is useless compared to the past, and can't even take care of himself. The girl's injury is like this, and you don't even seem worried. I guess you're too insensitive." Xingji just smiled and said nothing. Seeing that Xingji ignored her, she said to Shen Li again, "The girl must be unhappy following him. Why don't you kick him and follow this lady? You are a woman, so this lady's family will take good care of you." Shen Li was sweating silently on her forehead. She finally knew what Xingji's whispering meant. This golden snake demon is actually more interested in women than men. Lady Jean suddenly pondered, "It turned out to be like this." Shen Li looked up at her, and the golden lady said, "The girl is in the body of a phoenix." From the view of this lady, the girl must have been in nirvana not long ago. It is reasonable to say that both body and the spiritual power should have great progress, but it seems that inside the girl's body there was a powerful thing. At the time of your nirvana, the fire burned this thing and melted it into your bloodline, causing a conflict with the original spiritual power. The two opposed each other, and the result is that your mana is temporarily lost and your 5 senses are sometimes good and sometimes bad. If this remains like this for too long, this situation will only get worse, and the girl may really become a useless person. Shen Li thought of the panic she felt that day when all her 5 senses were lost and felt sad. Only by allowing the two forces in your body to merge with each other and dredging the meridians, can you truly complete your nirvana rebirth. Shen Li's eyes lit up. Can the Lady Jean have a way? If the lady is willing to help, Shen Li will repay you in the future. Lady Jean concealed her lips and smiled. This lady does have a way. As for the repayment, can the girl promises herself to me? Shen Li choked, but Xingji said. The stars in the outer sky have been brighter than usual in recent years. If Lady Jean is willing to heal Shen Li, Xingji is willing to pick the stars in return. Lady Jin's eyes lit up. Oh ho ho. Thousands of years ago, this lady asked you a star from outer sky, but didn't you refuse back then? Why are you giving me this so easily now? Her eyes rolled and she smiled. She glanced at Xingji. This lady had misunderstood the High God before, so you actually regarded this girl so seriously. How could you not show your care earlier? Otherwise, this lady wouldn't dare to try to hook up with this girl in such a manner. Shen Li turned her head to look at Xingji, and opened her mouth, wanting to ask, "It's okay for you to pick those stars casually? If it is picked, what will happen to you?" But Xingji just looked at Shen Li and shook his head with a light smile. Shen Li swallowed all the questions in front of Xingji's light smile. He didn't let her speak, as if he was afraid of the accountability. "It's decided then. This lady will help the girl to treat her illness. It's just that it's not early today. You are tired when you had to go up the mountain. Go back to sleep and we'll talk about it tomorrow." Lady Jean walked back 2 steps, and as if remembering something she turned her head to Shen Li. "I almost forgot to say that once the treatment starts, you must receive treatment every day for 9 days, and no day less. If you give up in the middle, you will die." Shen Li clasped her fists. "I will trouble Lady Jean." Welcome to my channel. This is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 62. The next day, it was snowy outside, and Lady Jean led Shen Li and Xingji through the trading hall. There was no one in the hall. The hall was never open to the public during daylight. The rare treasures in the hall were on display. Shen Li turned her head looking at everything. Lady Jean saw that and smiled. "Everything here is sold by this lady, but if the girl is attracted to it, this lady can just gift it to you. And if you want to kiss me for it, that's alright too." Shen Li's mouth twitched, and Xingji behind her turned her head straight, forcing her to look straight ahead. "Let's go." Lady Jean smiled. This lady was just joking. "Hi, God is so jealous, it's really stingy." Xingji pushed Shen Li forward and ignored Lady Jean. Passing through the main hall, walking through a piece of snow, and walking to a cave, Lady Jean turned around and said, "Hi, God should wait here. Inside is the place where this lady will treat the girl, and I hope God will keep watch here, and don't let anyone in." Xingji paused and then said, "Even if I go in, I can still guard." "That's not good." Lady Jean held Shen Li's hands. "This lady will undress the girl later. How can a woman's skin be seen by a man at will? Even if you are a god, that's not okay. If you still have to come in, I'll let you. You will treat the girl and I will guard and guide you from the side, but there will be some invasive treatment. God, you." Her eyes were charming when she whispered, "Can you do it?" The smile on Xingji's face did not diminish. "So, I'm guarding outside." Facing the provocation of Lady Jean, Shen Li was surprised a lot by Xingji's soft words. She was taken aback, and then she listened to Xingji said, "But, I still hope Lady Jean will also be careful. Don't do unnecessary moves, you don't want to touch the bottom line." When his voice fell, Shen Li only felt that the chill was even worse around him, but Lady Jean smiled and said to Shen Li, "Come on, girl, let's go in." Lady Jean guided her into a dark cave. When she completely entered the cave, Shen Li paused suddenly. There was nothing in it, and the sound seemed to be isolated by a thick stone wall, and she couldn't smell anything either. It was as if she was without all her 5 senses all over again. The feeling of total loss was the same, only the hand that was held by Lady Jean told her that everything was okay. "Girl?" Lady Jean asked softly. "Wait a minute." Shen Li tried to adjust her emotions. When she opened her eyes again, all fragility faded away from her face and posture. "Let's go." The person leading her was no Xingji. She has to arm herself as the invincible Azure King. Lady Jin's golden eyes lit up in the dark, and she smiled softly. This lady really likes girls' temperament. Moving on, Shen Li vaguely saw a glimmer of light. It was a simple place. In the stone room, there was a stone bed covered with dry straw. Behind the stone bed, there was a big bottomless hole. Lady Jean took Shen Li to the stone bed and let her sit down, and said with a smile, Here it's the place where this lady practiced and meditated. Shen Li looked at the dark cave extending downward. Strangely, where does that lead? There? Although the Lady Jean was still smiling, the next words she said were a warning. It's not a place where the living creatures should go. The girl knows that this lady is a monster. Since I'm a monster, I will inevitably give birth to some evil thoughts. The cave is pretending to be the evil thoughts and desires that this lady has separated for tens of thousands of years. This lady sealed them in the depths of this mountain. For so many years that I don't even know what they look like underneath. However, if the girl cherishes her life, she must remember, don't go in, don't be curious about it. Shen Li nodded. Sorry, I asked too much. The Lady Jean smiled. It's okay, it's something I had to tell you. Then, girl, please undress. Shen Li put her hand on her belt. Suddenly she thought of something, her figure paused and she asked. Should I take everything off? Lady Jean laughed happily. You can take it off everything if you want, this lady doesn't mind. As soon as she finished her words, something pierced through the cave with a sharp light, piercing directly at the feet of the Lady Jean. Shen Li fixed her eyes on it and saw it was actually a sharp ice arrow. This should be something made Xingji. Oh, the god is angry. Lady Jean chuckled. This lady almost forgot the god can eavesdropping through the magic barrier. It's nothing, girl, you can just take off your shirt. Xingji was eavesdropping? For some reason, when she thought of this, Shen Li's undressing hands were a little difficult to continue, but now she couldn't be hesitant or embarrassed about this kind of thing. Shen Li gritted her teeth and took off her clothes. When she turned her head again, the Lady Jean was no longer in the stone room. Shen Li was taken aback. Lady Jean? This lady is here. Hearing the sound of rustling, Shen Li saw that a golden snake head drilled from the straw. After coming out, she climbed onto Shen Li's legs, wrapped her waist, and finally put her head on Shen Li's shoulders. Well, with this body, this lady feels that the girl's body temperature is just right. It's really warm. Shen Li felt the cool snake's body rubbing against her, sometimes tight and sometimes loose, and she was half naked. She told herself to be calm again and again, but it was inevitable that she was a little bit ashamed. But with this body, how will the lady treat me? Simply put, I will inject my spiritual power into your body, help you dredge your blood, and balance the two forces in your body. She finished her inspection and said, Oh, there are so many wounds on the girl's back, which really makes this lady feel distressed. But I really like it, it's bloody, so handsome. Well, no, this lady doesn't want the outer stars anymore. In the end, I still want you. Then, her forked tongue stuck out and swept under Shen Li's cheek. Shen Li silently pushed her head away. Fortunately, this person is now in a snake body, otherwise, she probably couldn't help but beat her. Swish, there was a sound coming through the air. Countless small ice arrows pierced in the Lady Jean direction. Her snake's tail waved, blocking all the ice arrows, and she giggled in Shen Li's ear. Girl, you see, High God really cares about you. Shen Li said with endurance, heal the wound. I was just joking, the two of you are really boring, huh? Lady Jean raised her head slightly. You said to heal the wound and I will heal the wound. If there is some pain, you have to bear it. After speaking, the snake's body tightened on her body, and a tingling pain came from her neck. Shen Li seemed to be able to clearly see the sharp teeth piercing her skin, and a cold breath rushed into her blood. With the flow of blood, her limbs turned cold, but there was a sense of smoothness. After this breath circulated in her body for a long time, it suddenly stopped in the abdomen. Gradually, a scorching air was drawn out by it. There was no mana in Shen Li's body, but after this scorching appeared, she suddenly felt that the long sleeping mana in her body was also recovering. and immediately fought with the hot air as if they were about to swallow each other. Sweat oozed from Shen Li's forehead, and her abdomen was so hot that she felt pain. The sensation was the same as that day when she was about to fry herself up. The snake body that the Lady Jean wrapped around her abdomen suddenly emitted a cold air suppressing the burning pain there, and the power Lady Shen inserted in her body acted at the same time, enveloping the two entangled auras, and forcing them to fuse together. Finally turned into a breath that Shen Li had never felt before, hiding in her body. The cold air continued to move forward, dealing with the places where 4 or 5 breaths intertwined in the same way. After about an hour, the breath returned to Lady Jin's, and she let out a sigh. The wound on Shen Li's shoulder that was bitten by her, slowly healed. Lady Jean said, "Today is the first day, so I will only deal with these few places. After I adapt to this process, I will merge in a few more places." "Does the girl feel uncomfortable now?" Shen Li clenched his fists and then released the palms. "No. It just seems a little strange." "Why?" "I don't know, I feel a little more refreshed." "That's good." Lady Jin's body flashed brightly, and she stood in front of Shen Li in a human form again. "Then girl, put on your clothes, I'll take you out." "Lady, I have a question." Shen Li groaned for a long time before finally speaking. "Someone said that the Phoenix fire orb, that is the scorching force in my body, it originally belongs to me. That person said I was born with it. If that's the case, then why it conflicted with the spiritual power in my body?" "Born with the orb?" Lady Jean tilted her head and thought, "Oh, the girl is the famous Azure King. This power is innate to the king, and in the simple view of this lady, it must be your acquired spiritual power and the innate power that restrained it, which made the two forces unable to merge. The magical powers she learned. Everything she learned was from the Demon Lord, and the Phoenix fire orb was also given to her by the Demon Lord. Since the Demon Lord knows the Phoenix fire orb, he must know the spiritual power in her body, and the power of the Phoenix fire orb would clash. If so, why he had been teaching her this way for so many years. For the next 5 days, Shen Li stayed in the cave with Lady Jean every day. Before each treatment, Lady Jean always molested her. The first and the second time, Shen Li was mortified, but after many times, she became numb to it. Lady Jean knew the right and the left, and she would not do anything excessive, but she often distracted and chatted with Shen Li when she was treating her injuries. Ancient anecdotes that when told by her had a special flavor. She even told about a lot of things she had done and seen before. What she said was too interesting. In the beginning, she was considered the most beautiful and was teased by the gods giving flowers and presents, but in the end, she lost in beauty to Xingji, she told with anger. So she didn't step out of her house for a whole century. In the end, she had to rely on Xingji to coax her with wine to relieve herself. Shen Li was amused. It turned out that Xingji was such a person before she met him. But later, the gods died one by one, the sky became more and more empty, a close friend was punished by the sky at night, and thus fell into reincarnation forever. Looking at the changes in the mountains and rivers, he is the only one left, alone in the world. He has experienced so many losses, how can he not be indifferent? The relationship between Shen Li and the Lady Jean became more harmonious amidst these strange things, and Xingji would always stay outside the cave, hearing the things they talked about and wishing to forget. He raised his hands to his forehead and sighed, being a demon snake, she really has a long tongue. So after 5 days, Xingji stopped using magic to snoop, just stayed outside, waiting for Shen Li to come out. After getting acquainted with Shen Li, Lady Jean spoke a lot more directly. After healing her injuries that day she suddenly said, "Good sister, after thinking about it for many days, I still think I should tell you about this. Shen Li looked at her. The Lady Jean said, I don't know if you can feel it. The burning power in your body doesn't seem to be pure demon energy or immortal energy. In addition, you said to me earlier that the source of this breath is the Phoenix fire orb. I boldly guessed that what you have is more like a monster energy core. Monster? Shen Li asked. Lady Jean nodded, and then turned over in the dry straw on the bed, and took out a gray bead. She wipes off the dust on it and said, Look, this is my energy core. The light on the core rose sharply, and Shen Li twitched the corner of her mouth. You threw your inner core, just like this everywhere? If I remember it incorrectly, the monster will die without this thing. Lady Jean smiled, Sister, I'm no longer an ordinary monster, don't use common sense to measure me. She narrowed her eyebrows, but, I'll tell you seriously, doesn't my sister think her life experience is a bit weird? Welcome to my channel, this is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 63. Shen Li frowned, I only know that I was born on the battlefield. My mother and father were both members of the demon army. I was raised by the demon lord. For thousands of years, no one has ever questioned my identity. I don't think my life experience is weird. Lady Jean said silently, Perhaps your demon lord is hiding a lot of things from you. When you get well, you might as well go back and ask him. After saying this, Lady G looked at her own hands, and then helped Shen Li to tie her belt. After 2 more treatments, I can't touch you like this anymore. This lady is really reluctant to part ways. Shen Li smiled, Lady Jean is kind to Shen Li, wait for Shen Li to deal with trivial matters. After everything is done, I will definitely come to Lady Jean to drink tea and play games, and comfort your loneliness. Lady Jean covered her mouth and smiled, if so, this lady can wait. Before she could say anything more, her eyes snapped sharply, and a bit of killing intent appeared on her eyes. Oh, today is a strange day, there are some desperate guys who came to this lady's house to run wild. Shen Li said with a serious face, they're difficult to deal with? It is a little difficult to clean up, but sister you don't need to be afraid. With me and God Xingji here, we will turn them from bone into rotten meat, easy to digest. You wait here until your sister has dealt with them after I will come and take you out. Shen Li frowned, I'll go together with you. But Lady Jean pressed her down, how much mana did you actually recovered? You have lost your sense of touch today. Where are your weapons? Do you want to go into battle with your bare hands? Shen Li was stunned by Lady Jean's words. Finally, Lady Jean touched her head. Hey, it's okay to be protected by someone before you are completely cured. Let me go this time. After Lady Jean left, there was no sound in the hole, and Shen Li looked at her palm. This feeling of powerlessness really made people unable to adapt. She is not used to sitting at the end of the shield, enjoying the victory without fighting, she should. Suddenly, Shen Li heard a very fine wind in her ears, but there shouldn't be the wind in this almost closed hole. Shen Li's eyebrows sank slightly, her gaze fell on the corner of the cave. The extremely small noise awakened her already extremely sensitive hearing. She should fight. Shen Li raised her head quickly at the exact moment that a sharp edge flew over her head. A few strands of hair fell down. Her gaze immediately followed in another direction, where something appeared and disappeared before she could see what it was. Shen Li squinted slightly her eyes. Suddenly, who is coming? It was reasonable to say that there with Lady Jean guarding outside, even a mosquito couldn't fly in, how come this guy? The person finally stepped out of the shadows and showed his figure, that face, Shen Li remembers well. It was the person who had attacked her in the seaside hut not long ago. She still remembers this person carrying the person who was frozen by Xingji and running away. Now he has found her again, but, he seemed to be different from last time. He hunched down on the ground, with a stubborn face, grinning teeth, and spit from the corner of his mouth. If it weren't for his human figure, Shen Li would almost think he was a beast. Why did he become like this? Without waiting for Shen Li to figure it out, the man screamed and rushed forward. Shen Li dodged aside, avoiding dangerously. However, this man moved extremely fast. When he stretched out his hand, his sharp 5 fingers scratched Shen Li's waist. Shen Li gritted her teeth, and the mana that was so hard to recover quickly condensed a magic barrier. She blocked him and avoided to the side. The man quickly followed. His fighting power was not the same as a few days ago. Shen Li knew that in her condition she couldn't fight hard with him. Turning her gaze to see the dark passage behind the stone bed, Shen Li thought about it, dodged, and retreated back to the stone bed. She deliberately exclaimed, pretending to be behind the stone bed. When she stumbled and leaned back, the man flew forward. Shen Li was on the bed, raising her feet, and using the power of her pounce to lift him straight into the passage. Seeing the person falling, Shen Li breathed deeply, and suddenly heard Xingji's breathless call, "Shen Li." She turned her head and saw Xingji had run in at some point. How is it outside? Before she could complete the word, Shen Li only felt the tightness of her back clothes. She turned her head in amazement and saw the man like a ghost crawling out of hell, pulling her clothes, still behind her. A pair of scarlet eyes looked at her. Shen Li hadn't seen it clearly yet when a huge power surged in, surrounding her. Shen Li had nothing at hand. She felt a sense of weightlessness as she was dragged into the abyss. At the moment she fell, she seemed to feel a cold breeze and someone holding her hand, warm and forcefully. Someone accompany her to fall into the abyss desperately. There were cold water droplets on her face. Shen Li opened her eyes and saw the darkness all around her. She fell into the abyss, or she lost her 5 senses again? What was this situation? Shen Li pinched her face and felt a little pain. Presumably, she didn't lose all her senses, but seeing that her sense of touch has been restored, she must have fallen here a long time ago. She didn't know if there was enough time for Lady Jean to cure her. If she got hurt again, she was afraid it would be terrible. She stood up and touched the hard rock wall with her fingers. She thought that this place should be the rock cave at the bottom of the passage. Her current mana was not enough to let her fly out. Could it be that she would have to climb up with both hands and feet? When she was feeling helpless, Shen Li suddenly heard the sound of footsteps coming from the other side of the cave. The steps were light and steady. It was the sound of Xingji walking. She was overjoyed and called out, "Xingji!" The footsteps of the other side accelerated, and in a blink of an eye he was in front of her. "You are awake," he said. "Are you blind today?" Shen Li was taken aback. "There is light here?" "No, but the stone you picked from the boat that day is actually shining, although I can barely see when holding it." Shen Li nodded. "I just thought I could not fly out of here by myself. This is great. Now that you have found me, let's go out together." Xingji stopped and pondered for a while. "It's not that easy to get out. I've explored this place several times before you wake up. It looks like an ordinary stone cave with 8 passages around, but these passages are all sealed and we can't get out, and the hole where we fell isn't above our heads. It seems there are seals everywhere." "Well, Lady Jean seems to have said that this is the place where she threw her evil desires, so it makes sense that she would put a seal here." "So that's it," Xingji said. "She chose a good place. This place is a sealed place between heaven and earth. It is easy to enter and difficult to leave. With her power, it is indeed a good place to seal a monster, but," Xingji's voice stopped with a wry smile, "this will be bad for us." This, you are saying that you can't break this. There is a way, but it takes time and you can't wait. Xingji's voice was slightly condensed. There are 3 more hours before you need to receive treatment, and just 3, I can't do anything in just 3 hours. It's better to wait then. Shen Li said, maybe Lady Jean can save us from out there. Xingji sighed, this is all that we can do for now. There was a moment of silence in the cave. Xingji suddenly asked, is it cold? Shen Li shook her head and listened to Xingji, who said, I am a little bit cold. Shen Li said silently, you're very fragile. After saying this, she followed Xingji's breath. She slowly moved over and stood next to him. Lady Jean said that I am like a stove. Do you feel better when standing like this? Well, perhaps if you get a little closer. Shen Li moved a little closer. Xingji slightly curled the corners of his lips behind her, a bit more. Shen Li exploded, I'm standing next to you. Xingji laughed, and his breath was sprayed behind Shen Li's ears. Her cheeks turned numb and slightly red. Shen Li hung her head and was silent for a while, then asked. Lady Jean said that the force that opposes my own spiritual power may be a monster power. Her voice was a little dull, since she can see it, you should also, after all, you and I have been in contact for some time now. Xingji only said, and did not explain what it meant. Shen Li opened her mouth, and wanted to ask, why didn't you mention it to me? But she didn't dare. No matter, Shen Li said in her heart, what is the need to mention it? Everyone has their own mind. Time passed slowly, getting closer to the time when Shen Li should receive treatment, but there wasn't a sign of Lady Jean. Xingji suddenly said, How did Lady Jean treat you? Shen Li knew his intentions as soon as he asked this, because she thought the same way. He should be able to do the treatment thing as well, but... Shen Li stabilized all emotions and calmly said, she bite the skin around my neck, inject mana, and then use mana to calm my body. She omitted a lot, because she thought that although Lady Jean only asked her to take her coat, she took off all of her clothes. Just to make it easier for her to use a snake body to cool her down. Xingji frowned, it's just that? Shen Li affirmed, it's just that. Xingji was silent for a moment, this time, I'll help you. He knew in his mind that the time was approaching, so he lifted Shen Li's hair away. He pulled the clothes around her neck gently and pushed them aside. Her neck appeared before his eyes, and he could vaguely see the collarbone of Shen Li. Thinking of long ago, when he was still a mortal walking through the earth, the hairless phoenix turned into a naked girl in the cool night breeze. At that time, he put a blanket on her without changing his face and heartbeat. Now it was just the collarbone, but it made him feel a little lost. It's really hopeless. Shen Li waited for a long time, and noticed that Xingji's breath had been lightly falling on her skin. She was a little nervous, so she couldn't stop her mouth. Is my neck dirty? As she said, she reached out and rubbed it. Xingji sighed and grabbed her hand, it's very clean. His voice was slightly hoarse. He bit on it. Xingji's teeth were not as sharp as Lady Jin's. Her skin wasn't so easy to pierce. But he didn't want Shen Li to feel pain, so he just pressed his teeth lightly on Shen Li's neck. Shen Li gasped in a hiss, slightly angry, are you playing with me? Can't you be more serious? Xingji just wanted to hold his forehead. In the end, he had mana attached to his teeth, and with only a single tap, he broke the skin and flesh, and the smell of blood spread slightly in his mouth. He sent the mana into Shen Li's blood and followed slowly with the flow of her blood. However, he did not expect it to be like this. The more he spread his mana, the more small auras fought in Shen Li. However, whenever he resolved a conflict, Shen Li's body became hotter. He just started the process, but Shen Li was already sweating and her body was even hotter. Although she held back, Xingji had already clearly felt her physical discomfort. Xingji immediately condensed the cold air with his palms and sent it into Shen Li's body from both shoulders, but the speed of the cold air could not keep up with the heat rising in her body. It was hard to handle. Xingji's heart sank, and his hands reached in front of Shen Li and untied her belt. Shen Li was already a little confused by the heat at this time, unable to estimate the surroundings. Xingji's palm finally touched her skin, but Xingji found that even the barrier of his own clothes would hinder the transmission of cold air. Thinking of what he was going to do, his figure stiffened. The moment when he paused, the aura in Shen Li's body also paused, and Shen Li immediately hummed in discomfort. If it hadn't been uncomfortable, how could Shen Li behave like this? Xingji returned to his senses, closed his eyes, and concentrated. The white robe fell, and he hugged Shen Li into his naked arms. Welcome to my channel. This is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 64. A cool hand came from behind, clasping her shoulders. Xingji's skin pressed against hers, causing Shen Li to unconsciously let out a comfortable sigh. The hot temperature in her body was slightly reduced. Xingji wrapped her waist with his arms, and because Shen Li slightly arched her back when he bit her neck again, her back couldn't touch his cool skin, so she unconsciously moved in his lap, trying to get closer to him. Xingji sensed her intentions, and the hand that was around her waist gently lifted her up and let her back touch him. The skin touched, and his heartbeat was noticeably chaotic for a moment. Shen Li. Her bare chest was between his two arms that were encircling her body. As long as he opened his eyes, he could see her feminine figure. Her breasts were standing firmly in the air. That part was a little different in color, like a budding flower, making people want to touch it. Concentrate, he warned himself. He was keenly aware that there were evil thoughts slowly condensing around him. The evil thoughts and desires that Lady Jean has accumulated over tens of thousands of years were there. These things had no real form, but they had the power of enhancing the already existent thoughts and desires on people's hearts. Xingji was helping Shen Li during her treatment. It could not be interrupted and nothing could go wrong. He closed his eyes, calmed his mind, and concentrated on letting his mana work in Shen Li's body, solving her mana conflicts one by one. With the inflow of Xingji's power, the heat of Shen Li's whole body was gradually suppressed, and her brain, who was burned by the high temperature, finally recovered a little sense. She could not see with her eyes, but her sense of touch was extremely sensitive. She knew that she was in front of him. Two naked men's arms were encircling her, and a strong and cool body was stuck behind her. She knew who was holding her. Shen Li admitted that at this moment, her brain was almost blank. After being dazed, her sanity gradually recovered. She knew that Xingji was healing herself, but Xingji's head was close to her ears, and he was biting her neck. This was a dangerous posture because Xingji could kill her by biting her carotid artery with too much strength. She had to be calm, but she already started to freak out. This sense of crisis, as well as the magic power he continuously injected into her body, made her more clearly and profoundly realize the existence of this person, and realize that they were now glued together in an almost unforgivable, intimate position. She could feel the beating of his heart, the breath he exhaled on her shoulders, and his slightly moist lips around her neck, and occasionally she could even feel the arc of his throat subconsciously swallowing. Everything was so clear and true. Even if Shen Li couldn't see. She also gritted her teeth and closed her eyes tightly, as if she could feel a little less like this, as if her heartbeat would calm down a bit, as if those strange impulses, would slowly disappear. But fuck. Her dark world now was full of Xingji sounds, his smell, his heartbeat, breathing, and the rubbing sound of his arm gently moving on her skin. All of this made it hard for her to. She couldn't resist it. Shen Li moved her body uncomfortably, and Xing Ji, behind her, took a heavy breath. He hugged Shen Li's hands tightly, as if warning her not to move, it would be over soon. Xing Ji could feel that his breath was already in her entire body. Now, Lady Jean could finish the treatment later. Xing Ji forced himself to calm down. At this time, how could he still think about other things? But Shen Li took a deep breath and expanded her chest. He let go as if he was afraid of strangling her, but when he hugged her again, he buckled his arm on Shen Li's shoulder and accidentally touched one of her exposed nipples. As if electricity passed through her body, Shen Li became stiff, and her breathing was almost still. She didn't know what Xing Ji thought at this time, but Shen Li felt that if he touched her again, she was afraid she would lose her mind. She must have gone crazy, and if she is crazy, she shouldn't harm Xing Ji. Why not? Suddenly a voice popped out in her mind, as if another self was looking at her in a dark corner. If sex is a sin, wouldn't everything be born of sin? No, it's not the same. Shen Li wanted to refute that self. He is a god, and he is in charge of the world, so he can't be afflicted. He can't, but why do you want to accompany him in this depression? It's his business that he can't have personal affairs, what that has to do with you. You are Shen Li, no one stipulated that you can't have personal affairs, since he needs restraint, then you can make him stronger. You can satisfy your own selfish desires, and even keep him from violating the ways of heaven. Shen Li was shocked. Just in this cave, no one will know. She heard her voice full of the ultimate temptation. You have always suppressed yourself, restrained yourself. What the world needs, what the people of the demon world need. But what about yourself? Right here, indulging in this life once, no one will know. Heavens can't blame Xing Ji, this is just your fault, it was you who couldn't restrain yourself. The voice faded, but the feeling of her skin became more sensitive. Perhaps it was her illusion. The arm around her was trembling inexplicably. His breath left her body, and finally, his mana returned to his own mouth. The two should separate now. However, he did not let go of her, his teeth left Shen Li's flesh, but his lips did not leave, he stopped there quietly, doing nothing, but he seemed to be kissing her. Her neck veins were pulsing, the mood was ambiguous and extremely dangerous. She rarely called his name like that. Huh? He muffled, the voice from his throat was hoarse and extremely magnetic, and easily stirred Shen Li's restless heartstrings. She stroked his hand that was holding her waist with one hand, stretched back with the other hand, hugged Xing Ji's head, and gently pressed and squeezed him. Shen Li listened to her muttering voice and said, "Don't move, just, don't move." Xing Ji pressed his lips to her neck motionlessly, feeling the vitality of her pulse. Because of her movements, blood bead oozes from the bitten wound. Xing Ji's eyes are dim, not knowing if it was intentional or not. The tip of his tongue slid across Shen Li's neck, licking the blood oozing out of her. The gentle movement and the gentle tip of the tongue easily broke the last string in Shen Li's heart. She had not put down the hand that held Xing Ji's head, and she turned her whole person in his arms, and her other hand hugged his back, almost impatiently printing her lips on his. The smell of her blood flowed between the breaths of the two. "Stop," she called softly, her voice slightly confused, but the next sentence was extremely firm, "I will treat you too." The person kissing her seemed to move the corners of his mouth. After a while, he vaguely replied, "Yeah." After he agreed to this, Shen Li left his lips and fumbled a little. She sucked hard on his neck, and the place immediately became red when she stopped. Shen Li said, "This is my mark for strengthening you." She emphasized, "I made you stronger." Shen Li. Xing Ji said suddenly, Has anyone ever told you that when a woman always emphasizes a word, it is very inviting? He covered the back of Shen Li's head with one hand, pushed her in front of him, and unceremoniously covered her lips so that she had no time to speak. Shen Li let him kiss her, but her hand caught Xingji's hand that was in her waist, placed the hand in her chest, and then pressed his hand down on her. When his palm touched the softness, Shen Li's body stiffened, and within a moment, she wrapped her arms around him and used all the techniques she knew to tease with her lips and tongue. Xingji's palms covered her breasts until Shen Li's mind became blurry. He touched the tip slightly, and Shen Li's body became stiff involuntarily. So he touched again, and then boldly kneaded with 2 fingers. Shen Li's body softened, and her throat let out an extremely depressing moan before she fell softly. Xingji had already wrapped her waist. Shen Li. Xingji stopped. I really hope you don't regret it. Shen Li smiled. The one who will regret, it should probably be you. She dropped her hand and put them in his bottoms. She fumbled and touched the hot thing inside. The shape was slightly straightened, he gasped, because of Shen Li's hand, and she raised her head quickly and kissed his lips again. This was so unexpected that Xingji stopped, and then leaned back and fell to the ground. Shen Li also pounced on his chest. Sitting on his lap, she patted his chest and lower abdomen with one hand, and finally stopped at his chest again with her fingertips. Don't stop me, she said, gently leaning down, putting that part on her mouth. You can't do it by yourself, Xingji said, but she only gave Xingji a slight bite and he frowned. Shen Li. She heard him call her name but ignored him because she had reached the last place between them with one hand. If there is a God's will, Shen Li thought, then it can blame her. Shen Li sat on Xingji and buried him quietly in her body. The tearing pain almost made her unable to continue, but this was their only time doing this. Therefore, no matter how painful it is, she made her mind, she would continue. Even if it split her, grind flesh and blood, she would continue. She wanted to be with Xingji so much in her heart, she wanted to be with him all the time. When he entered completely, Shen Li lost all her strength in an instant, panting heavily, crawling on his chest, listening to his heartbeat as fast as her own. She felt him gently touching her own head, and heard his distressed voice, "Does it hurt?" Shen Li's eyes became wet instantly. She lay on his chest, and her voice was trembling. "It hurts," she said, "it hurts. It hurts to have to leave you, it hurts to be with you." Shen Li was overwhelmed and didn't know what expression she should do. Welcome to my channel, this is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 65. Xingji stroked Shen Li's head lightly, and finally sat up still connected with her. He hugged Shen Li in his arms, patted her back gently, and pressed her head against his neck and said, "I will be there for you, I will always be, no matter if the sky is broken, Shen Li, I will always be by your side." Shen Li couldn't help trembling with pain. In the end, she bit his shoulder. In this situation where any touch was extremely sensitive, his muscles tightened, and the things below couldn't help but move inside Shen Li. Shen Li softened all over, but Xingji supported her. Xingji hugged her waist and held her. "Don't cry, Shen Li." Shen Li actually did not shed tears. She was sure that tears were weak and feeble, and nothing could be changed when she shed them, but with Xingji's words, she actually felt a sense of powerlessness, letting her tears go and soak his shoulders. "You can't say that, you're not feeling this pain." Xingji sighed softly, admitting defeat, and said, "I also hurt." Her bottom was too tight, and Xingji inside her made her feel numb, sore, and bubbly, and she could even feel Xingji's pulse. Thinking about being strangled, she didn't feel well. Shen Li hugged him and laughed, but after a while, tears came out again. She wiped away the tears, and continued to laugh. "We two, Shen Li said, "It's really unreasonable." "Yes, it's unreasonable." Xingji replied softly, his lips gently rubbed against the edge of Shen Li's neck, and slowly descended, reaching the front of her chest, gently touching her in the same way she did to him before, licking him. The tip of his tongue agitated her already tense emotions. "Xingji." Shen Li hugged Xingji's head, her body's senses were concentrated on her breasts. Shen Li felt that the pain underneath was slightly relieved, so she boldly moved her waist a little. The connecting place just rubbed lightly, and the man who was buried in her chest tightened and groaned. It turned out that Xingji just chuckled against Shen Li's skin. It turned out that the high god persistence was no more than that. He had already restrained his itching so hard, but with only one light movement, Shen Li had instantly disintegrated his line of defense and broke into his heart like an army. Fortunately, Shen Li didn't move for a second time, because it was this light movement that had caused her body to tremble involuntarily from pain. "I don't understand," she was breathless. Why would anyone be keen on this? Obviously, this was more uncomfortable than being cut by a knife. Breath flowed between the two of them, and they both calmed down for a while, and then Xingji said, "If it hurts, we can stop." Shen Li gritted her teeth. "You can still say that." She breathed hard, her lower abdomen tightened, but after the pain, a tingling sensation spread between the two, her fingers tightly clasped Xingji's back. Teeth bit his shoulders. "Today, even if it is a painful death, I will never stop." This is the only time she could be with him. Shen Li gritted her teeth. This was the first and perhaps the last time, completely possessing each other. She tried her best to keep the burden of the three realms out of her heart and threw away all her identities and their responsibilities and burdens. How can she give up now? She wants him, even if she tears herself apart, even if she dies, even if she falls to the bottom of hell, she wants him. For at least one moment in this life, she's only Shen Li, giving herself wholeheartedly to one person, and integrating that person into her body. She dare not ask for too much, nor can she ask for too much. That's it. A moment is enough. She moved up and down with a trembling body. The feeling of friction was extremely painful for Shen Li, but it was bliss for Xingji. Shen Li's blood flowed from the depths of her body, and it even wetted the area where she was connected with Xingji. His complexion instantly turned red, and his breathing became uncontrollably heavy. He hugged Shen Li tightly with both hands, feeling her body trembling from pain. But listening to her groaning as she couldn't help it, the joy in his body was exchanged for the pain in his heart that seemed to be crushed. He felt Shen Li's despair. It was not difficult for him to guess what Shen Li was thinking. It was precise, because of understanding Shen Li and seeing through her mind. Xingji couldn't control but to feel worried for her. She is such a brave person, he couldn't help but like this kind of person. Shen Li. He called her name hoarsely. "I will be with you," he said, as if swearing, "we will always be together." Shen Li's movements became more intense, and Xingji knew that she didn't feel happy. He hugged her tighter, controlling all his senses that were mobilized by Shen Li, and just quietly hugged her tightly. Shen Li could no longer move. He gently patted her on the back to calm her down. "So, don't be afraid. You don't need to be so afraid." Shen Li sat on him, slowly calming down. She stretched out her hand to touch his face, and smiled swiftly. "It's really strange, why although I'm so close and hugged you so tightly, why do I still feel horrified? Trust me." Xingji dropped a kiss on her neck and inhaled lightly. "Shen Li, trust me." Shen Li didn't know how to believe him. She just turned her anxiety into action, so she lowered her head and kissed his lips fiercely again. She didn't want to think about anything anymore. Now she will just do what she wanted to do, and later when she wakes up, she can try to fix it. She wanted to take the initiative again, but Xingji suddenly moved on his own. This made Shen Li somewhat unaccustomed, but both positions were hurtful, so she didn't bother to use any more force, relying on Xingji. However, Xingji's movements were extremely soothing. Shen Li occasionally heard men discuss such things in the military. She knew that a man would never be this calm in normal situations. The body above under her body was hot, but his breath was also restrained. She knew that he was controlling himself. In this situation, he was still taking care of her. Shen Li's heart was crossed. Her heart was in such a state anyway. At least, shouldn't one of them be happy? She touched around Xingji's back, using her lips and tongue back and forth in his neck. She heard Xingji swallowing unbearably, and moving a little bit faster under her body, but still restrained tightly. Shen Li bit his ear and softly said, "Hurry up, it's okay." Xingji smiled, utterly dumb, "Don't worry, you will hurt." Shen Li hugged him, "I'm fine, I can hold it back." After a quick stop, he sighed slightly, "Why don't you understand?" He raised his head and bit Shen Li's chin, slightly condemning, "I want you, happy." They both just want to make each other happy. Shen Li resisted the pain and took the initiative to act. "Xingji, you don't know, I am happy enough now." As soon as she moved, she made Xingji unable to restrain himself. He turned around, pulled the clothes on the side, and placed them under Shen Li. Switching up and down positions, his movements were much smoother. Shen Li's hand caught countless marks on his back, but she didn't say anything, only occasionally squeezed his name out of her throat, as if he was the only one she could perceive, as if they were the only ones in this world. The only thing that survived and lingered on her mind. "Xingji." Her voice was a little broken, "You know? I want to be with you. Then we will be together." He leaned down and gently touched Shen Li's lips. His breathing became more rapid and his movements underneath became faster. Shen Li gritted her teeth and Xingji's body began to spasm. The scorching heat dissipated, and his breathing was chaotic. "But this is not." Her wheezing was so disorderly, but her words were so clear and cold, "It's not possible." Shen Li was exhausted, so she closed her eyes, and fell asleep quietly. When she woke up again, her vision had recovered. She looked around and found out what the stone cave actually looked like. Xingji was still there. In the stone cave, the air didn't flow, and the extremely ambiguous smell seemed to have been coiling around the two of them and the clothes that Xingji used to cover them. Shen Li smiled and thought that this was similar to sharing a bed. She sat up, and put her hand to pull her clothes from him, but he didn't move, letting her pull for a long time without succeeding. Shen Li frowned and Xingji, with his eyes closed, just let out a soft sigh. "I've been waiting for you to speak with me." He opened his clear eyes. There was no confusion of someone who just woke up. Shen Li said silently, "Wake up now, give me the clothes." He still didn't move, and only said, "After 4 or 5 hours, you should receive treatment again." After hearing these words, Shen Li still didn't react for a while. When she reacted, her face became stiff. Yes, she should receive treatment after 4 or 5 hours, so that she could get stronger and leave. It was inevitable. To think that the two have been sitting there naked for 4 or 5 hours. And, this situation, speaking in such ambiguous words. Her face was burning. God. Shen Li stayed quiet for a long time, and dragged the clothes out from under Xingji with great strength. "It will be cured when the time comes." Pulling apart Xingji's clothes, Shen Li generously put on her clothes in front of Xingji. But when she turned around, she saw that Xingji was also dressed. He smiled softly, "Azure King and I always treated each other with courtesy, and I cannot be abrupt now." Shen Li nodded, sat down, and solemnly said, "What happened today was all my fault." God does not need to blame himself. Seeing her saying this seriously, Xingji stopped for a while, and shook his head then smiled. First, I don't blame myself. Second, what exactly is your fault? Third, Shen Li, why are you acting like you took advantage of me? Finally, Xingji suddenly got up and walked to Shen Li in an instant. He knelt on one knee, bent over, and raised Shen Li's chin. When Shen Li didn't react, he printed his lips on her. After grinding her lips for a while, he let her go. He didn't dodge Shen Li's dazed gaze, his smile was a little helpless. I know what I'm doing, and I'm always sober. Shen Li seemed to froze, forgetting all his reactions. After a long while, she pushed him forward violently. He didn't move, and she fell to the ground by herself. Shen Li covered her lips and looked at him. You are crazy. Xingji chuckled, about me, from the moment you were buried in the Eastern Sea, I was never normal again. No. Shen Li said with a serious face, no. You can be crazy, others can be crazy, even the three realms can be crazy, but you can't. You are their lives, you can't be crazy. What can I do then? Xingji said, I have stepped into the abyss, I struggled and refused, but in the end, destiny still never let me go. Shen Li, what do you think I should do? Shen Li was silent. Xingji looked at her for a long while, and said, only emotions will not be a problem. If I never do anything against the sky, I won't be backlashed by the heavens. Shen Li, can you believe me? He smiled, would you like to help me, and try this with me? Outer sky is free from outside interference, we can stay there forever. Shen Li looked at him, then shook her head, I can't do it. There are so many things that have yet to be resolved. Fuxing is still alive, the demon kingdom has been threatened and her life has gradually become confused. And, although the sky is stable, stability is not the life state that Shen Li pursues. In this stone cave, she can tell herself that she is only Shen Li and can tolerate her own greed for a while, but once she goes out, she is Azure King, there is a home with her name in the demon realm, and there are so many generals and soldiers under her, they are her responsibility. Even if Xingji's actions were free, easy, and bold enough, Xingji vowed that he would not violate the way of heaven and Shen Li couldn't let go of this responsibility. Moreover, even if they really do go to the outer sky together, such a woman who will cause him trouble and leave he uncertain, how can the heavens tolerate a high god that may collapse at any time? Welcome to my channel, this is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 66. There was silence in the stone cave for a long time, and Shen Li asked as if thinking of something, I have forgotten before. Isn't there a man in black under Fuxing's who fell with us? Xingji was startled, he shook his head and smiled. Shen Li, I have lived for so long, and only now I met a woman like you. After all of that, you can just turn and talk about business right away, as nothing happened. He said. The half-funny and half-helpless ridicule made Shen Li let out an unnatural cough. After watching her for a long time, he narrowed his smile and turned his face straight. The person disappeared when he fell. It seemed like a waste of energy to look for him. We have to save our energy as much as possible. Thinking back to the scene at that time, Xingji frowned slightly, such a scene makes me inevitably think of some past events. Shen Li looked at him curiously, Xingji was frowning. He raised his eyes and his gaze met her, he concealed a trace of emotion in the depths of his eyes, pondered for a while, and said, back then, you should know about the monsters that messed up the demon world. Thousands of years ago, the monsters wreaked havoc in the demons and heaven's worlds. Xingji tore a gap in space and sealed all of them, it was the seal of Su Tianyuan. Shen Li knew this past so she nodded quietly. Xingji slightly curled his lips, I'm afraid you don't know it completely. Thousands of monsters appeared in the demon realm, but they didn't come out of thin air. They were made by the last demon lord Lu Ming using forbidden techniques. At that time, Lu Ming was dissatisfied with the incompetence of the heavens, unwilling to subdue to the heavens, and wanted to take the place of the heavenly emperor. However, his plan to deploy the army to attack the heavens was strongly opposed by the ministers of the court. They feared that a war with the heavens would only harm the people of the demon realm. Lu Ming was unwilling. He was refining thousands of monsters in private, intending to attack the heavens, but because of the large number of monsters and powerful forces, he couldn't control it. So the monsters almost destroyed the demon realm, and the demon realm was unable to resist. This story was passed to the heaven realm, and the Emperor of Heaven came to find me. Then, there was the matter of sealing the monster and beasts later. Shen Li was stunned to hear this. She remembered the battle with the horrible fox, and that it was a monster that had not fully recovered its mana but already made the soldiers of the devil world and her so desperate. So it can be seen how powerful thousands of monsters were at that time. Such a powerful force was actually refined by one person, and that person, he is too terrifying. His horror does not come from his strength, but his unsatisfied heart. He creates monsters without restraint. If Xingji hadn't sealed it, then they would have killed all of them, including herself. At the time when I first entered the demon realm, I fought against monsters for the first time. I didn't know what they were. After fighting for 3 days and 3 nights, I discovered that they were extremely difficult to kill by swordsmanship, and even if they were killed, they were only turned into black energy that would be absorbed by other nearby companions, enhancing the power of another monster. If so, sealing them was indeed the fastest way. Shen Li couldn't help feeling that the Xingji was resolute and clever at that time, and she felt a little embarrassed to think that she had questioned him before. So far, what have you thought of all of this? Xingji suddenly asked Shen Li. Shen Li was stunned, and then she thought about what he had just said before telling all of this to her. Her face turned white. Those creatures and the man in black who were chasing after me are a bit similar to those monsters? He stopped and nodded. When we encountered them for the first time in Yangzhou, they weren't complete, but this time when they came, it made me feel that the people who made them have good skills. Shen Li gritted her teeth. It must be Fu Xing. What a ghost. But how does he know the method of refining monsters in the first place? And your water stop technique, what are they trying to do? Xingji touched her head. You are not good at scheming and tend to forget things. It is really hard for you to think about this game transparently. Shen Li squinted her eyes in dissatisfaction, and Xingji smiled like he was teasing a cat. He said, First, to answer your first question, in my opinion, Fu Xing may not know all the methods for refining monsters, otherwise, he would have already made the monsters directly. Why bother to make so many creatures that look like semi-finished products? He should know one part, but the other part can't be known for some reason. What is strange now is, from where did this partial knowledge come from? I remember that Lu Ming had been cut down by my sword. No one in the world should remember the technique of refining. Xingji pondered for a while, and temporarily put aside this doubt, and the second question and the third question may be answered together. First of all, their so-called stop water technique seems to me to be nothing more than a child's play. That was just an ice trick. Without divine power, they can't manipulate the magic. Secondly, do you still remember King Rui we met before? I remember. Last time you heard me talking with his reincarnation, he is the fallen god Qingya and is my best friend. Although the water stop is my spell, I have taught Qingya some things. Do you remember that first life Fu Xing also appeared? Maybe he managed to spy on Qingya, trying to learn about those memories when he was a god and learned a little bit about this water stop technique. Shen Li suddenly realized, now that I think about it, he might have voluntarily tampered with a lot of things at the beginning, such as the crown prince looking for you who was just a human at that time. Another example is when he burned your small courtyard and forced us to seek refuge in King Rue. When we were in King Rue's mansion, I felt devilish energy. It turned out to be him. Xingji nodded. You remember things clearly. Please continue to guess and try. What was his purpose? Shen Li's eyes rolled, forcing me to leave you, and then I was captured by the demon realm chaser and was forced to agree with the marriage with Fu Rong. He wants me to marry Fu Rong? Shen Li was surprised. What for? The point isn't who you would marry, but that if you marry, then you would have to go to heaven. The corner of Xingji's lips twitched. He wanted you to leave the demon realm. Shen Li understood, but there were even more questions covering her face now. Looking at Shen Li's frowning brows, Xingji smiled and continued to guide her. During that time, if I hadn't extended the date of marriage between you and Fu Rong, you would probably be already married to the celestial realm. Soon after, something happened at the demon realm, do you remember? Shen Li recalled for a moment, and her face turned white. She stood up suddenly. Su Tianyuan, their purpose is Su Tianyuan. At that time, the monster escaped and severely injured the soldiers defending the border. Mo Fang went to defend and the general went to support, and then Zixia desperately sent a letter back to the capital before he died. Mo Fang was seriously injured, but Mo Fang is on the monster's side. How could he die? Soon after, Xingji came to the demon realm to reshape the seal. Following that, the mountain gods of the human world were captured one after another. Although they didn't know the specific purpose of capturing the mountain gods, it must be related to the semi-finished demon man Fu Xing created. At that time, she was still fighting 3 demons in Yangzhou City. In this way, the method they obtained to refine the monster beast probably came from the Su Tianyuan. Shen Li rubbed her eyebrows. There was some confusion in her mind. So many things happened. At the time she looked just at the surface. It seems that everything was just happening naturally. It turns out that under the surface, there was another hand pushing things forward. Shen Li asked, you knew about these things early? Xingji shook his head. It was only after there were more clues that things were slowly connected together. Shen Li said, we have to get out of here quickly. Report these things to the demon lord in order to take countermeasures. Xingji's eyes drooped slightly. Although I don't want to say that, I have to. I advise you to be 2 guards against the current demon lord. Shen Li was startled when she heard these words, and Xingji looked up at her with a cool gaze. After sealing the monsters thousands of years ago, my vitality was greatly damaged, and I couldn't manage the demon world anymore. The new demon lord was chosen by the demon clan. At the time, there were still many people among the demons who were dissatisfied with the demon world surrendering to the heavens and taking care of the seals. However, the demon world was in chaos at that time, and they were eager to choose a talented person who could take up this important task as the demon lord. They did not pay much attention to their personal position and preferences. I can't say exactly what kind of person the current demon lord is, but I'm sure that he is hiding something from you. Shen Li didn't hesitate when she said, the demon lord might be hiding something from me, but he would never harm me, I believe him. She replied decisively and firmly, so Xingji became slightly startled, and immediately lowered his eyes and said, if you could believe me that much, it would be good. His voice was extremely small, but Shen Li heard it. She turned her head and said, this is different. The demon lord is also a teacher and a father. Without him, I wouldn't have survived. He has saved me countless times in times of crisis. Now, even if he lied to me my entire life, if in the end, he wants my life, I would give it to him. Xingji looked at her quietly, then he lowered his eyes and smiled and said in a very low voice, how can I let you die for him? After that, you would just leave me. How can I be willing? In the stone cave, there was a moment of silence, and Shen Li turned her head and changed the subject, speaking of which, how Fuxing knows that we are here. With your power, no one would be able to follow us. Xingji shook his head. If I guessed it right, they didn't came for us. Shen Li was startled. They came to this snowy mountain, maybe they came for those rare treasures? But this didn't feel right. If they wanted those treasures, why come all the way to this remote cave? The only explanation is that their goal was Lady Jean. Shen Li frowned. When we fell, you left Lady Jean alone to block Fuxing. Will she be able to do that? Don't worry about her, even if she can't stop him, escaping is her best ability, we should wait. Oh, this lady had the trouble of coming down to save people. I'm so sad to hear God saying that. A coquettish voice came from the top of her head, and Shen Li looked up. The stone was still sealed, but her voice was as clear as it was only separated by a layer of paper. This lady can't believe this. The god must apologize to this lady, otherwise, this lady will leave you here and go out. Xingji pondered for a while. So, I won't apologize. You can go back. Shen Li glared at him, and Lady Jean smiled. Oh, how dare God! You still want to stay with my sister, so I have to take you out. After saying that, a big hole was pierced in the top of his head, and the dark passage led directly to the top. Quickly come out. These 3 words were said quickly and urgently. His figure flashed, he took Shen Li's waist and flew into the passage. The stone room above was Lady Jin's stone room. She stood by the stone bed when Xingji and Shen Li jumped out. She finished performing the seal. A golden light was sealed on the entrance of the cave, sliding down against the stone wall. They could hear countless shrill screams below, hitting the golden light, intending to escape. When the golden light flourished, all the voices disappeared. Lady Jean wiped the sweat on her forehead and sighed. I finally sealed these guys. She turned to look at Xingji and Shen Li. With an ambiguous corner of her eyes, she asked Shen Li, when you were below there, nobody bullied you, right? Shen Li coughed, pulled away from the hand that was still holding her waist, and said with a stern face, the god is pure and upright, he doesn't have these evil thoughts. The golden lady listened, her eyebrows drooped. It seems he can't. The tone seemed extremely disappointed. In the end, she was looking forward to how they would be played by her evil thoughts. Shen Li silently wiped a cold sweat. Suddenly, as if thinking of something, Lady Jin's eyes flashed. How do you get treated yesterday? She just started talking, but suddenly she frowned, and said in a deep voice, be careful. Lady Jean turned her head and just listened. A scream behind her pierced her ears, and she fell to the ground. At the same time, a cloud of black energy like arrows rushed out of the tunnel, passing by Lady Jean, leaving a string of a woman's sharp and wild smile behind. This is terrible. The golden lady was lying on the stone bed with her ears covered. Shen Li hurriedly went over to help her, listening to Lady Jin's whisper, this is impossible. How? What is this power that can break my seals? Xingji was silent, and then spoke, you are inhaling the emotions and desires in our hearts. Lady Jean looked up at him, God, I dare to ask how powerful your desires and emotions are? This is so painful. Welcome to my channel, this is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 67. Since it's my fault, I will help you. As soon as Xingji said this, Lady Jin said hurriedly, don't. I can do this by myself. You can't figure out its temperament. Shen Li frowned, what the hell was that just now? I see its sharp sound seems to hurt you a lot. This lady threw thousands of years of evil thoughts inside that place. Sometimes, it can also condense into a shape on its own, which is somewhat similar to my shadow. Because it was originally in my body and mind, even if separated from me, it knows my weakness. You said so yourself, so wouldn't be even harder for you to face it alone? Shen Li said, this is happening because of me, let me handle it. Lady Jean turned her head, her weak boneless hands gently touched Shen Li's face, her eyes waved. My dear sister, how can you be so good to me? It really makes this lady's heart touched. After she said, she pouted and caressed Shen Li's face. Pulling away, Lady Jean rushed into the air. Xingji smiled and curled his lips without a smile, you spoke well. Lady Jean curled her lips, it understands me, but I also know it better, it's something that came from me after all. I can handle it. She adjusted her clothes and got off the stone bed. But that thing can confuse people, draw out bad thoughts and evil thoughts in people's hearts, and then keep sucking them to make itself stronger. When fighting with it, you mustn't be tricked. She looked at the two of them, Shen Li was flushed, she turned her head and coughed unnaturally. Lady Jean smiled and narrowed her eyes. At this point, it is a very troublesome thing. To prevent it from harming people, this lady must catch it back as soon as possible. She waved her hand. This lady will leave now, you two take care. Her figure flashed and walked extremely decisively. Shen Li said wait, but before she could say anything else she saw another golden light in the room, and Lady Jean appeared in front of the two again. Ah, I forgot to say that the time for the last treatment is approaching. So just do like the last time and let High God take care of it for you. After the treatment, my sister's body may fall asleep for a while, and your 5 senses will be restored after you wake up. As for the magic power, she must rely on daily meditation and breathing and slowly recover it. She blinked at Shen Li, one last time, don't waste it. With a gust of wind, she was gone. Shen Li looked at the place where Lady Jean disappeared and twitched her mouth. Lady Jean's malicious thoughts were stripped away? Shen Li doubted. This was clearly a hint. And she just runs away after saying this. Lady Jean doesn't know that this was very irresponsible? Shen Li turned to look at Xingji, intending to talk about serious matters. She saw Xingji pinching his chin. He looked at her with a serious face and nodded, speaking of which, it is indeed time to start the last treatment. Should we fall into the hole again? You can't be more serious? Shen Li's ears were red, and she reprimanded him in a deep voice. But Xingji just smiled. Master, dare to ask, which sentence was not serious? Shen Li was silent. At the moment of embarrassment, a golden light flashed before Shen Li's eyes. Shen Li is like a frightened bird, what else do you want to say now? Lady Jean looked hurt. Hey, you just rolled your eyes, sister, why did the younger sister treat this lady like this? Her eyes were gleaming with tears, and Shen Li looked at her embarrassed. Sorry. I just lost control for a moment, I'm sorry. This lady wanted to say that I might spend some time to catch this evil thought. That guy named Fu Xing, who came for trouble before, you intend to find him to settle the scores, right? If you do this, you must remember to bring back my monster core. Lady Jean said agreed. That day you fell, I was anxious and didn't notice, but after I realized that my monster core was missing. Although I don't need it anymore, I don't want him to have it. Fu Xing took your monster core? Shen Li sternly interrupted her. Murmured in a deep voice, why does he want your monster core? This lady doesn't know. Lady Jean waved her hand, I don't really want to guess this time and later be wrong. Lady Jean went away again. After listening to what Xingji had said under the stone room, Shen Li knew that Fu Xing must be very purposeful in doing things. At this time, he took away Lady Jin's monster core. Is this connected with his plans? And why this? Seeing that Shen Li's brows were frowning deeper and deeper, Xingji stretched out his index finger to rub her brows, and said, I don't understand it now, but we can solve this mystery later. Now the priority is to cure your body. Shen Li's body stiffened slightly, but the treatment had to be done. She nodded, then turned her back to undress. Xingji only looked at her back, his eyes cool. There were scars all over Shen Li's back, which were from her past and meritorious service. He didn't do anything, just watched quietly. As if time had stopped, he stood there quiet until Shen Li turned her head back, strangely. What? Xingji shook his head, smiled helplessly, and said, It hurts? Shen Li was slightly startled by these 3 words. The corners of her mouth moved, but at the last moment she turned her head to avoid his look. It's okay, doesn't hurt anymore. But Xingji still didn't move. Shen Li was silent for a moment and then said, God, regarding the injuries and pain, our memory can deceive us. Because if you always remember the pain too clearly, you will never be able to embrace a new life. My training helped me choose by myself, remember or forget. I chose to forget. And in so many years of training, my body and brain have already turned this forgetfulness into a skill. Shen Li turned to look at Xingji. The pain yesterday was forgotten yesterday. These injuries have long ceased to hurt. I had even forgotten that they were still there. Xingji remained silent, but gently took her into his arms. Shen Li. He whispered behind her, I want to protect you, give you a safe life, are you willing? Shen Li was silent for a long time and only sighed, heal this injury first. She said, this time, don't, I can't forgive myself if that happens again. Xingji chuckled in her ear, who do you think I am? If you don't want it, I won't force it. And, you were so aggressive yesterday, so now it makes sense that you're uncomfortable. He said. Shen Li's cheeks blushed. Shen Li still felt a strange feeling in her heart, but she knew that she shouldn't. After that, the time passed and the treatment was over. When the mana that helped Shen Li to dredge the meridians returned to Xingji's mouth, Shen Li only felt a strength all over her body, and her eyelids were so heavy that they could hardly be lifted. Before going to bed, Shen Li struggled and said, I should go back to the demon world. Xingji hugged her and stood quietly for a while, then put her down and helped her dress up. He touched Shen Li's head and said, I know you will be angry, but now, no matter what, I won't let you go back to the demon realm. When Shen Li woke up again, she felt that she was flying. She rubbed her eyes and saw the sight. The wind was blowing on her face, and her sight was present. She felt that she was being held by somebody, so touch was also present. She smelled what seemed to be the smell from somebody's skin, her sense of smell returned. She raised her hand and bit her own mouth. She felt a little salty taste, so the taste was also there. She recovered all 5 senses. Xingji. She yelled extremely happily, the happiness in her voice couldn't be hidden. The person holding her responded softly. Shen Li smiled happily, my 5 senses have finally recovered. Xingji was infected by her emotions, he also smiled slightly and narrowed his eyes. Then Shen Li said, now, I only have to meditate, and I'll be able to recover my mana in a few days. Then I will help the demon realm and settle the account with Fu Xing. As soon as her voice fell, the curve of Xingji's lips narrowed slightly. He said, why not let me avenge you? Shen Li was taken aback, but she replied. He attacked the demon real, tried to kill me, and then tortured me. I will personally pay this grudge. Xingji argued, he intends to ruin my seals. I should take care of it. Shen Li was surprised, this is not a competition. We are dealing with the same enemy. I want to avenge myself, but that doesn't mean others can't help. If you want to go, let's join hands. Xingji was silent for a moment. I would like to do this alone. Shen Li felt wrong, frowned, and asked about another matter that was bothering her. Where are we? I'm almost at the eastern gate. Shen Li frowned. What did you bring me to the heavens? Didn't I said that I wanted to go to the demon world? She said that and struggled to leave Xingji's embrace. She was furious. What the hell are you going to do? The outer world has its own enchantment, no outsider can enter, it is the safest place, you will wait there after I finish everything, you can come out. Shen Li said with a sharp voice, you want to put me under house arrest? Xingji glanced at her, if you see it like that, then sure, I'm putting you under house arrest. Absurd. Shen Li scolded, you are really crazy. It won't happen. Xingji stopped talking, and when he entered the eastern gate, the guard at the gate saw him and was about to kneel and bow. But seeing the person he was holding in his arms, he was stunned for a while, and the two guards hurried forward. He stopped. God. This is Azure King? She's not. Shen Li was angry and shouted, yes, I'm Azure King, tell the god to stop being crazy and put me down. But before her voice fell, she felt her throat tighten, and she couldn't speak anymore. How dare he? One of the guards muttered to himself as if dumbfounded, I really thought. The other guard gave him a stern look, and he immediately turned around and ran to Heavenly Emperor's residence. Another guard dragged Xingji and said, Hi God, are you going back to the outer sky? Xingji ignored him and walked away. The guard hurriedly called out, God please stay. Because you were in the lower realm a few days ago, acting in the eastern sea, and slightly agitated, heaven is a bit unstable, and it is not good for God to go back now. Heavens are unstable? Heaven's instability must be, because the only God was reproved by heaven's will. Shen Li stared at Xingji in a daze. What did this guy do in the eastern sea? It turns out that he was wounded before, was it the backlash of the power of the heavens? Xingji stopped moving forward and paused. Someone got hurt? It's just that a few stone tiles fell sporadically, but it didn't hurt anyone. It's just that the heavenly stone tiles were very heavy. They smashed the 9 layers of heaven into some small holes and fell into the lower realm. Fortunately, they only fell into the mountains without hurting no one from the lower realm. There were only a few tiles, but they were enough to cause damage. Shen Li gritted her teeth secretly, facing this reality. If she still thought on indulging her feelings, it would be too selfish. Well, I will discuss with the emperor afterward, you go and guard the gate of heaven. Xingji faintly fell and turned and wanted to leave, the guard had to stop him, and heard a loud shout from the horizon. High God stay! High God stay! The emperor didn't take the imperial carriage and came to the gate riding a cloud alone. He got off the cloud and hurried forward, almost staggering. Seeing that Xingji was holding Shen Li, the emperor sighed heavily, God. You are, why? Xingji was silent. Behind the emperor, hundreds of civil and military officers in the heavens stepped on the clouds, and they were crowded in front of the gate for a while. Everyone looked at Shen Li and then at Xingji, and then looked at each other a few times, everyone sighed. Shen Li thought that she couldn't even count how many of them were showing dissatisfaction and scolding her in their hearts. How could Shen Li fail to understand their expressions? If she was in their places, she would probably spurn them too. But even in this environment, Xingji just smiled, and quietly said to Shen Li, have ever thought that one day you would have the role of the seductive demoness? Shen Li was startled and just wanted to sigh. Even with this situation, Xingji was still making jokes. This could also be considered a talent. When everyone saw Xingji's reaction, they all looked down and became quiet. Among them, the emperor was the first to put his hands in front of him, clasp his fists, and bow. I'm asking to High God to pity the sufferings of the three realms. Life is not easy. Behind the emperor, hundreds of officials bowed and knelt on the ground. High God, please have mercy on the sufferings of the three realms. Life is not easy for the common people. Amidst this condemnation, Shen Li could not move, could not speak, and stopped silently. Shen Li looked at the heavenly emperor, who kneeled down. In the past these immortals were so proud, now they are willing to beg. That was all they could do. Shen Li didn't know how she felt when she saw this scene. She smiled bitterly in her heart. Xingji, you see, if we are together, no one wants to bless us. Even so, are you going to risk it? Welcome to my channel. This is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 68. On the south gate, the atmosphere was tense as the immortals knelt down uniformly. Xingji didn't even open his mouth to help them get up. He only held Shen Li and smiled. I know the sufferings of the three worlds, and I know life isn't easy for the common people, but until now, I never actually harmed the public. It is really wrong for the immortals to talk about crimes that have never happened. An impatient immortal raised his head and said with anger. The gods have frozen the eastern sea using the water stop technique for 10 days and 10 nights, violating the way of heaven, resulting in damage to the divine body. The outer sky became unstable, the tiles and stones passed through the heavens and fell into the lower realm. It destroyed thousands of mountains and forests, and the continuous fire burned for half a month. Hundreds of mountain gods had to cast spells for days to put out the fire. Dare to ask the gods, can't this matter be considered a crime? He froze the eastern sea for 10 days and 10 nights. Shen Li was stunned. He really lost his mind at the time. Xingji was silent for a while. This matter is my fault, and I acknowledge my sin. The immortal added, I understand that High God can't always control his emotions. So we can let it pass this time. At least this matter we manage by persuading the mountain gods, but what if there is another accident next time? Today, the High God found Azure King and took her away. This is a disaster hanging on the top of the three worlds. Dare to ask the High God, how can we feel safe? Xingji's eyes were slightly cold, and the heavenly emperor saw that, so he said hurriedly. High God is not strange to Rongjun, Su Ri's hot temperament. He spoke too aggressively. Hope God's anger will be calmed down. It's just that, what Yuan Xianjun said wasn't unreasonable, so I hope that the High God thinks twice. The emperor said. The kneeling 100 officials also followed. We ask the High God to think twice. Shen Li looked at Xingji and then looked at the people present. Xingji with a bleak expression and a cold voice said, This matter is my fault. Shen Li has nothing to do with it. I hope that the immortals will not make random accusations. Besides, my mistake was moving divine power and violating the way of heaven. Being with someone isn't a mistake. As soon as these words came out, the immortals immediately became noisy. After all, what he said means that he was planning to do things in his own way. Sure enough, he acted as if he hadn't heard their discussion. His eyes were fixed on the emperor, his tone was determined, and he said. This time the outer sky is unstable, I will have to deal with it on my own later. The forest of the human world was burned, and I am willing to take responsibility. But about Shen Li, I won't retreat. He lowered his eyes and looked at Shen Li, who was staring at him in his arms. For a moment, he involuntarily softened his eyes. Never mind you, even if it's her, I won't let her say no to this. He was so overbearing and unreasonable. If there is anyone who is dissatisfied, Xingji raised his head and curled his lips with a smile. Let me borrow the words of Azure King and say, I'll not hesitate to fight with you. The noise disappeared, and there was silence. In the stunned eyes of everyone, Xingji took Shen Li back to the outer sky and no one dared to stop them. In the outer sky, the stars were in the sky, and the place where the high god lived was filled with eternal awe and peace. Xingji put Shen Li on his own bed, and after covering her with the quilt, Xingji looked at Shen Li with a wry smile and complained, "I am always forced by the three realms, who in the world can be said to be shackled like me?" Shen Li stared straight at him, knowing what to do. He moved her fingertips a little, and Shen Li's throat loosened. She said, "You stand on the highest place, are loved by the people, and have the strength of heaven. Who is worshipped like you in these three worlds?" Shen Li said, "There is nothing free in this world." Shen Li said, "Nothing is cheap. You can't take advantage of it." Xingji smiled, "I'm just complaining about a sentence or two, this can also teach you a lesson." Shen Li looked at him for a while and said seriously, "In the demon world, I have never done heavy work. The food I eat and the clothes I wear are all provided by others. I have no other skills. I only have my strength. Fighting is the only thing I can do to protect the peace of the demon world. So I can let the people who have done heavy work and are willing to provide for me live peacefully." Shen Li paused, then said, "God Xingji, perhaps everyone has something to do in life, a responsibility, but also a mission." Xingji looked at her. The curvature of his lips was the same, but the brilliance in his eyes dimmed slightly. "The way you're telling me this, it makes me believe you think I don't know this truth." Shen Li closed her eyes and cleared all emotions in her eyes. "I like you, and I want to be with you more than anyone else, like sitting in that small courtyard under the vines, basking in the sun and blowing in the wind. I like you so much, I wish I could melt all my flesh and blood into your body, I wish I could breathe with you all the time. It's impossible for you to know, but sometimes, I like you so much that I can't even recognize myself." She said every word so seriously, but every word was deliberately stripped of emotions. "I know that in my whole life, I could never love someone so deeply as I love you, but I also understand that these feelings are not the only reason for me to live. I still have things to do, and you have to bear your responsibilities. So, Xingji, even if I am not the only thing in your life worth living for, I'm one of the reasons." When Xingji interrupted Shen Li, he smiled and touched Shen Li's head. "It's enough for me." Xingji was determined to be obstinate until the end. For 3 days, Shen Li was imprisoned. Even though Xingji brought her meals every day, the rest of the time he was very busy. He did not even have time to exchange more than a few words with Shen Li before turning around and leaving soon after. Shen Li knew that he had to patrol the entire outer bounds of heaven. He had to see if there were places that slackened due to the shaking. Without Xingji by her side, Shen Li was able to meditate with peace of mind and adjust the aura in her body. The outer bounds of heaven had abundant spiritual energy, which unexpectedly assisted Shen Li in her recovery. Within 3 days, Shen Li recovered 60 to 70% of the powers in her body. Additionally, the 60 to 70% of powers that she recovered were much purer than before. This made Shen Li extremely happy, but being kept in the cage all the time, it left her without a place to practice with the powers surging through her body. Thinking about the state of the demon world when she left, Shen Li sighed a little. She did not know how they were doing now, whether the demon lord's injury was healed, whether the broken defensive barrier in the capital city was repaired, and whether Su Su and Royu were living happily in the king's mansion. They must have been very sad when they received word about her death. So right now, the news that she was found by Xingji should be traveling back to the demon realm. They should gain some peace of mind, but if they did not see her, then they would still be worried. When Shen Li sighed again, she heard slightly hasty footsteps coming towards her direction. It was not Xingji. Xingji had never exhibited behaviors that were slow or hurried. In an instant, Shen Li frowned and became alert. The graceful figure of a woman appeared in Shen Li's eyes. It was Yulan, running all out of breath. When she finally saw Shen Li, her face was overjoyed. However, when she saw dozens of icicles standing in front of Shen Li, her face turned white all over again. Shen Li frowned at her. "What are you doing here?" In 2 steps, Yulan reached Shen Li and said, "The Heavenly Emperor wants to do something to you, so I came to take you away." Baffled, Shen Li was still frowning. When Yulan saw this, she took 2 steps forward again. "Yesterday, I accidentally passed by the Heavenly Emperor's palace hall. There, I heard he was consulting with several generals. Today, they plan to lure the divine sovereign Xingji to the mortal realm, then someone will go to the outer bounds of heaven to make you take the Soul Eater heart pill." "What is that?" "This medicine will make the consumer's soul leave the body and scatter into dust, but the body will still be intact. Then after the consumer's soul dies, it will take over the consumer's body and act according to the master's instructions. The Heavenly Emperor wants to kill you, and then make your body into a puppet." Yulan said anxiously, "Based on the time, they should be here soon, but these icicles, what should we do?" Shen Li was silent. "I have 2 questions. First, isn't there an enchantment barrier in the outer bounds of heaven, so how did you all get here? Second, why should I believe you? The bloodline of the heavenly emperors carries the qualification to enter the outer bounds of heaven. This qualification was granted by the deities in ancient times. Those generals are all my uncles, like me. They carry the bloodline of the heavenly emperors, so they can enter the outer bounds of heaven. As for trusting me," Yulan paused. Suddenly, she lowered face. "King, if you have seen the divine sovereign's appearance during that time, then you will no longer harbor the idea that if you're not here, he'll get better. I just don't want the situation to get worse." Again, Shen Li was silent. "Was it you who persuaded him?" Yulan's eyes displayed her sadness. It was the divine sovereign, his heart was dead. She sighed softly and closed her eyes, as if she could not bear it any longer. However, even so, every day, he still kept wandering around the eastern sea. The person who was closest to heaven was like someone who was abandoned by heaven. He could only search and wait hopelessly, but fortunately, she raised her eyes and glanced at Shen Li. Hiding in her eyes were several different emotions. "Fortunately, the king is safe and sound." Shen Li lowered her eyes, recalling Xingji's moods on the day she came across him on the coast. Perhaps it was something she would never understand in this life of hers. Shen Li took a deep breath and said, "Take a step back." Following her directions, Yulan took a step back. She saw Shen Li wrapping her hand around one of the icicles, and a raging flame burst out from her palm, encircling the icicle. However, after the raging flame engulfed the icicle, only a few beads of water dropped and the icicle did not even melt. As Shen Li frowned, Yulan said, "This must be condensed by the divine sovereign using the water prohibition technique, so ordinary flames can't do anything to it at all." Shen Li snorted. "Who said my flame was ordinary?" After saying that, she gripped the icicle in her hand and her palm flushed red. As she released a low groan, the icicle she was holding suddenly emitted white smoke. In less than a moment, the icicle softened and Shen Li kicked it outward to squeeze out of the gap. Seeing the cold air coming off of her palm, Shen Li shook her hand. "This water prohibition technique is pretty formidable. For something that Xingji made with just a casual wave of his hand, it was already so difficult to dissolve. If he was a little more serious, then would that not mean that she would have been locked up in here forever?" "Let's go," Shen Li said. "If the generals of the heavenly realm come, then it's a trivial matter. But if Xingji returns, then it'll be even harder to get away." Welcome to my channel. This is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 69. Walking into the great hall of the outer bounds of heaven together with Yulan, Shen Li's nose swiftly picked up something. She turned her head towards the side and her footsteps stopped immediately. Yulan, who was hurriedly leading the way in front, heard Shen Li's footsteps getting farther away. She looked back and saw that Shen Li was walking toward the middle of the great hall in a daze. While in front of the great hall, there stood a red-tasseled silver spear. Yulan had seen it before. It was Azure Sky King's spear, but was this silver spear not already broken? Although she had heard that the divine sovereign Xingji forcibly demanded the spear from the demon lord's hand, she never thought that he would actually repair the spear. After the spear was repaired, it was even placed in the great hall of the outer bounds of heaven. The silver spear and Shen Li seemed to have a heart-to-heart connection. Every time Shen Li took a step closer, the silver spear exuded sounds of buzzing excitement as if welcoming its own master. Shen Li stood in front of the silver spear for a while. She carefully looked at it for a very long time. Suddenly, she smiled and reached out to hold the staff of the spear, just like many thousands of times before, when she and it were fighting together as one. As the silver spear made revolutions in her hand, the aura of death stirred the quiet atmosphere in the outer bounds of heaven. With the sounds of small tinkling bells, the end of the spear was thrust into the hard flagstone. Turbulent air surged out, lifting up Yulan's hair and robes outside the great hall. Yulan stared dazedly at the woman in the great hall, looking at the smile on her lips, the buzzing silver spear in her hand, and the sharp blade glowing with intense light as if it was chanting a joyous song. From head to toe, Shen Li's majestic aura was so dazzling that it made people not dare to look at her, but that was what made it so beautiful, too. This was the real Shen Li. Holding the spear and straightening her back, she looked like the Azure Sky King who could hold up the falling sky all by herself with her own power. Great partner, I thought I would never be able to fight side by side with you again. Shen Li stroked the red tassel on the spear. However, the feeling of ruefulness only appeared on her face for a moment. She collected the expression on her face and whispered softly, I will have to trouble you in the future. After saying that, the silver spear turned into a ray of light in her hand and disappeared. Then she walked towards Yulan, her steps becoming more and more resolute. Let's leave quickly. I don't want to fight with your people from the heaven realm at this time. Yulan was stunned for a moment, and then she quickly led the way. After walking a short distance, she suddenly felt a slight disturbance in the air. It was very likely that the people from the heaven realm had finally come. Yulan looked back at Shen Li, a little stumped for words. Was it her misperception? Why did she feel that the present Shen Li seemed to have sharper senses than before? Shen Li and Yulan hid their aura to escape the generals and stepped into the heaven realm from the exit. Since the last attack, the security in the heaven realm had indeed become a lot stricter. But the cultivation of these guards was not enough to detect the whereabouts of Yulan and Shen Li. They made a beeline straight to the southern heavenly gate. When passing through a place, Shen Li looked down and involuntarily asked, after that day, was the heaven realm attacked again? Yulan followed her gaze and looked down. Then she immediately understood, King, don't you remember? That's Lord Fu Rong's residence. Shen Li was slightly stunned. Lord Fu Rong? Why has his residence become like this now? As she looked, she only saw that the courtyard had been bombed by something, and there was even a big hole in the ground. The colors of the red safflower and green grass in the courtyard had faded away, so wan as if it was washed away by something. Yulan let out a sigh of disappointment that bordered on resentment, but there was also sorrow in her words. That brother of mine, who isn't worthy of any respect, has not done anything worthy for the pride of his family since he was a child. This time after knowing the demon realm's general Mo Fong. Oops, he can't be called a general anymore. After knowing that that person died, my brother went almost crazy. His spiritual power exploded and it blew up his own courtyard. His spiritual power was really pure, so it actually purified even the flowers and plants. After that, he lost consciousness for a long time. Then later, he learned the news about Mo Feng's mutiny. His entire person became very uncommunicative, and he did not allow anyone to take care of the courtyard. That's why you see it like this now. How could that fickle Lord Fu Rong really be hurt? Additionally, his magic was truly very pure. So before, he was not bragging just to brag about his ability in this area. Shen Li did not bother to think too much about other things, she just glanced at it and continued to move forward. Almost at the southern heavenly gate, Yulan and Shen Li hid in the dark first. Yulan said, "The divine sovereign should be busy in the mortal realm right now. If you want to go find him, then go east." Shen Li shook her head, "I'm going back to the demon realm." For a moment, Yulan was stunned, then she understood Shen Li's meaning and her eyes dimmed. "Although I don't understand what your perseverance is about, but if it's possible, I, Yulan, hope that you two can face it together." While Shen Li was silent, Yulan bowed to her, "I'm going to lead the guards away first, and when there's an opportunity, King, please depart by yourself." After saying that, she stepped out and said something to the two guards, leading them away in another direction. Within that moment, Shen Li moved like the wind, and in a flash, she leapt down from the southern heavenly gate and disappeared into the sea of clouds. Yulan knew that she was gone, so she did not bother to look back. Her eyes were looking high and far. "It appears that I have made a mistake about the movement on that side just now," she said, "it's just like a dream." After passing through the small gap between the two realms, Shen Li stepped into the demon realm. With just a single inhale, Shen Li breathed in the air in the demon realm and immediately frowned. After Xingji reconstructed the seals on his own, the ruins of heavenly poles no longer overflowed with miasma, so the breath in the demon realm became cleaner with each passing day. However, today, when she breathed in the air, the scent in the air was even fouler than before. On another thought, Xingji did receive some backlashes from the heavenly laws recently, so it would affect everything that involved his divine powers, like the tiles and rocks falling from the outer bounds of heaven. Naturally, the ruins of heavenly poles that he created would not be spared either. It would also mean that the seals must have slackened. The demon sovereign must be having a headache at this time. Then Shen Li recalled Fu Xing's purpose that Xingji had mentioned to her earlier. That guy had devious plans about the ruins of heavenly poles. If he wanted to break the seals and release the demon beasts, would this not be a great time to do so? When Shen Li thought of it like that, she felt that she should not delay another moment and rode the clouds straight to the demon palace. However, before she could enter the demon palace, Shen Li's body froze. Involuntarily, Xingji's previous words came to her mind. Words about the Azure Sky Oceanic Pearl that the demon sovereign gave her. The demon sovereign taught her the ability to counterbalance the Azure Sky Oceanic Pearl. The demon sovereign even kept her in the dark. No matter how resolute Shen Li's heart was, she would inevitably have some doubts about facing this series of events. However, when she was deep in her thoughts, she suddenly heard a cry of surprise, "My lord!" The vigilance of the soldiers in the demon realm was always much higher than that of the soldiers in the heaven realm. Shen Li looked down and saw that it was General Yixing from the army. It was because of his shout that made everyone raise their heads. When they saw Shen Li, everyone became clamorously noisy for a while. Finally, an unknown person took the lead and knelt down on one knee, tucked in his chin, and bowed in salute. This was the highest formality in the demon realm's army. Then all the soldiers followed his example. They placed their weapons down and bowed their heads to the ground, and said loudly, Congratulations to the king's victory. Congratulations to the Azure Sky King's victory. Shen Li did not win any victory. In the previous battle with Fu Xing, it could be said that she had suffered a disastrous defeat. After losing the general and getting taken herself, if there was no betrayal from Mo Fang, who came to save her, and if she did not meet Xing Ji, who was wandering the eastern sea, then it was very possible that she would have already died. However, she understood the victory in the mouths of the soldiers. This victory was not meant for her, but rather the soldiers were saying it to the demon realm's army. For many soldiers, this king who was never defeated was the center of belief in their hearts. Additionally, to them, Shen Li's existence was like a flag that would never collapse. If Shen Li died, it would not only hurt the strength of the demon realm, but also the morale of the army. Now that she had returned, it was a great joy for the demon realm. Her safety was a victory. Landing on the ground, Shen Li gave Yixing a pat on the shoulder to signal him to get up. Everyone had too many expectations for her, so these expectations were the reason why she still had to guard the territory of the demon realm no matter what. Everyone get up. She raised her voice and shouted, all of you quickly return to your posts, perform your duties, and make no mistake. As everyone accepted the order, a deep resounding yes echoed in the sky. Shen Li's lips could not help but quirk up. Then she turned around to help Yixing, who was still kneeling, stand up. Up and down, she sized him up, how's the army? When Shen Li helped Yixing up, his expressionless face carried a barely concealable excitement at this time. To answer the king, everything is fine. Everyone was just waiting for you to return. Shen Li nodded and smiled, I have returned. With a thump, Yixing knelt down again. Startled, Shen Li asked, what's up? Yixing was silent for a long time before he said, before this, the news of the king's death was reported to the heaven realm by this subordinate. At that time, the divine sovereign Xing Ji just happened to be near the heavenly emperor's side. In front of his face, I sincerely swore that the king died in battle, otherwise, I would be struck by lightning. As if he lost all of his strength, he sat down on the ground and looked up at Shen Li, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. My lord, this time, you have really harmed this subordinate. When Shen Li heard his words, she laughed heartily. If Xing Ji really wants to strike you with lightning, I will bear it for you. Yixing hurriedly said, my lord, you have just returned. You need to recuperate. This lightning, I will endure it. I will take it on. If by enduring a few lightning strikes in exchange for my demon realm's Azure Sky King, then I, Yixing, am willing to suffer lightning strikes every day. Suppressing the smile on Shen Li's face, she only patted him on the shoulder, go and do your own business. I have something important to discuss with the demon sovereign, so I'll be going first. No matter what the demon sovereign's plan was, no matter how he treated her all these years, Shen Li thought to herself, if he could manage an army that everyone was willing to put the effort in for the demon realm, then how could such a person be detrimental to the demon realm and how could he harm the child that he raised with his own hands? After knocking on the door of the demon sovereign's sleeping chamber, Shen Li waited quietly outside for a moment. Suddenly, she heard the person inside cough a few times before saying, what's the matter? She had heard this voice since she was a child, but today, there was a lot of tiredness and hoarseness in this voice. At this moment, Shen Li threw all of the conspiracies and suspicions aside. She pushed the door in and walked around the screen with familiarity. She walked to the divan and saw the demon sovereign lying on the bed. Shen Li's expression revealed her pain. Why's the injury still not healed? Upon seeing Shen Li, the demon sovereign immediately sat up from the bed. However, due to his excitement, he experienced a coughing fit. Shen Li sat down by his bedside and patted his back lightly. The demon sovereign reached out and grabbed her wrist, holding it so tightly, as if he was afraid that she would run away. "Ali, I knew that you could not die that easily." He coughed and said, "Master always believed that you were still alive." In an instant, Shen Li's eyes turned red. "Master, this disciple is unfilial." The demon sovereign shook his head. "You've returned, hack. It's great that you've returned. Welcome to my channel. This is the audiobook, Accompanying the Phoenix. Chapter 70. It was another violent coughing episode, as if he was coughing out all of his internal organs. Shen Li patted his back lightly and asked softly, "You were injured last time, why hasn't the injury healed yet?" The demon sovereign shook his head. "It's just that I've been too tired in the last few days." Before he could even finish speaking, his hand that was holding on to Shen Li's wrist froze. Then he pushed Shen Li's sleeve up and checked Shen Li's pulse. After a while, he sighed. The emotion in his voice was indistinguishable. "That pearl. You have finally absorbed it completely." For a moment, Shen Li patted the hand on her back. The tone of her voice deepened slightly. "Master, Shen Li has something to ask." She pondered which words to use. This time, in the face of danger, Ali was fortunate to have the help of the divine sovereign Xingji. Also, another person, Fan Qiyu. He was the expert who helped heal me. He said that this Azure Sky Oceanic Pearl was more like a demon's nuclear core. While you, Master, the cultivation that you taught me, the magic and the spiritual force were all incompatible with this Azure Sky Oceanic Pearl. Master, since you already know so much, and things have progressed up to this point, I shouldn't lie to you anymore. The demon sovereign tried to suppress his coughs. "Help me to the desk and let's go to a different spot to chat." Once again, it was that same teleportation array formation under that same desk. Just like last time, when the demon sovereign gave her the Azure Sky Oceanic Pearl, the array formation sent the two of them to the mysterious sacrificial hall that was as silent as death itself. In the hall, the pearl enshrined on the high altar was no longer there. The demon sovereign declined Shen Li's continued support of his arm and lightly pushed her away. As he slowly advanced, he took off his mask and his physique changed, returning to the body of a woman. Before the high platform, she stood quietly for a while. "It was such a long time ago, so long that I can't even remember much about the details, but I have always remembered what your mother looked like when she and I were here together paying homage to our former master." "My mother?" "Your mother entered the sect 3 months after me. After she formally became a disciple, she lived with me in the same room. Every day, she came to pay homage to the master with me. She had an easygoing temperament and was favored by the master. She also attended to the master's needs. The master's favorite hobby was to refine medicine. So on occasion, he would impart knowledge to her and teach her the puppet refining medicine technique. She was talented and intelligent. In less than 3 years, out of all the master's disciples, she inherited the most skills from the master. This was a good thing, but, the demon sovereign lowered her eyes, the former master still had other thoughts of his own. As the level of his refining technique became higher, it was more difficult for him to be content with the status quo. In the end, he created a type of monster. While this type of monster, you have already fought against them. Shen Li's voice deepened. "They're the monsters in the ruins of heavenly poles?" "That's right, your mother's master and my master was the former demon sovereign of the demon realm, Lu Ming." The demon sovereign stepped onto the platform and wiped the dust on the high altar where the pearl was enshrined with her fingers. When the first demon beast was successfully created, as the master's disciples, everyone was happy and excited. As far as the demon realm's army was concerned, it was a big killing tool. However, when the master started to frantically create demon beasts one after another, the situation began to lose control. On some occasions, the demon beasts would tear down fellow disciples and swallow them into their bellies. There were also demon beasts that escaped and harmed the citizens of the demon realm. The protests in court were getting louder, but the master was obstinately willful in getting his own way and kept creating more demon beasts. It seemed that he really wanted to form an army of demon beasts as he planned, and then control such an army to attack the heaven realm, to pull down those high and mighty immortals from above, to have them bow down to the demon sovereign and make the demon clan the ruler. Shen Li shook her head. When the soldier becomes the dictator of the army, the general becomes useless, but the general is the brain, the soldier is the blade. An army without a brain is just a bunch of killing machines. I'm afraid the demon beasts weren't even under that person's control. At that time, in the demon realm, there must have been a lot of lives lost. The demon sovereign nodded. At the same time, whether it was in the court or in the sect, there were voices of opposition, but your mother strongly supported Lu Ming. Shen Li was stunned, while the demon sovereign said with a sigh, they also saw the demon beast's damages. Lu Ming's own powers were not enough to control so many demon beasts, so he devoted his efforts to refining the king of the demon beasts that was several times stronger than other demon beasts. At the beginning of the demon beast king's birth, he was just a child and was just like any other child. Lu Ming named him Shen Li. He was given to your mother, so that she could take care of him. He absorbed the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and grew up. Compared with other demon beasts that randomly appeared in the realm, he was more like a naturally born monster, and therefore his power was even purer and stronger. Shen Li grew up very fast. In just 3 months, he was like an ordinary teenager. No one could even have imagined that a demon beast like him would fall in love with his caretaker. Feeling astonished, as if Shen Li could not believe the full meaning behind the demon sovereign's words. The demon sovereign frowned. No one could even have imagined that your mother also fell in love with him. Stunned, Shen Li lowered her head and stared at her palm, murmuring in a trembling voice, I am the child of a demon beast? I am. When she recalled the appearance of the scorpion-tailed fox running out of the ruins of heavenly poles, she immediately frowned, the child of that kind of demon beast. The demon sovereign was silent for a moment. Not long after that, the officials in court secretly reported the disasters with the demon beasts to the heaven realm. The heaven realm was shocked and sent troops to the demon realm. However, by that same time, Lu Ming had already created several thousand demon beasts, so the soldiers of the heavenly realm suffered a disastrous defeat. After they returned, the heavenly emperor finally asked the divine sovereign Xingji to descend into the lower realm. By himself alone, he fought against the several thousand demon beasts, beheaded Lu Ming, and captured Shen Li. Finally, he joined forces with the soldiers of the heaven realm and forced thousands of demon beasts to the border and opened up the ruins of heavenly poles to seal all of the demon beasts within it. After Xingji sealed the demon beasts away, his vitality was severely damaged and he immediately returned to the outer bounds of heaven, while the army of the heaven realm quickly evacuated. At that time, although all the demon beasts were sealed away and Lu Ming was already dead, the demon realm was still in chaos. One faction claimed to support the youngest son in the womb of Lu Ming's concubine as the ruler, while the other faction was determined to abandon the style of Lu Ming's party and establish a new ruler. The two factions were constantly fighting. After a war that lasted for several months, I understood the style of Lu Ming's party. If they were not completely exterminated, then they would make a comeback in the future. There were still those who supported overthrowing the heaven realm by using the demon beast's powers. I have done outstanding military service on the battlefield. It was unintentional, but I was nominated by several elders to ascend to the throne of the demon sovereign. Then after that, the last time that I saw your mother was on the battlefield at the border. When we defeated Lu Ming's party completely, they were planning on how to enter the ruins of heavenly poles and escape into the seal. Your mother was there, too. At that time, she was really close to giving birth. I secretly took her away from the battlefield and found a place within the vegetation to help her give birth. At that time, I just found out that after your mother knew that Shen Li was sealed away, she carried you to the border all by herself. However, after she arrived, she was not allowed to enter the ruins of heavenly poles. Then after she knew what the members of Lu Ming's party were plotting, she joined them. She wanted to go in to see your father, who was sealed away. As Shen Li clenched her fists, she bit her lips to hold her tongue. After giving birth to you, your mother bled incessantly, and she knew that she would not survive. While the demon beast's aura in your body was too heavy. In order to protect you from being hunted down by people from the heaven realm and the demon realm, she used the last of her strength and extracted the aura of the demon beast from your body. She transformed it into the Azure Sky Oceanic Pearl. Then she left it in my hands. In the end, she died from exhaustion. Her last wish was that she hoped that you could roam the blue sea and azure sky for the rest of your life, without the shackles of your identity. Unlike your father, who is still suffering from imprisonment. Now that I think about it, the moniker Azure Sky King was bestowed upon you by your mother. So there was such a person who sacrificed her life for hers, but she did not know anything about it. When she did finally find out, it was already too late. Feeling extremely powerless, Shen Li asked in a hoarse voice, "Where are her bones now?" She said she wanted to accompany your father, but she didn't allow me to erect a gravestone. She feared that someone would find her, and you would be implicated by someone's groundless accusations. So, I buried her next to the ruins of heavenly poles, but I'm afraid that I won't be able to find her anymore. There's nothing beside the ruins of heavenly poles. Shen Li fought battles there, her expression darkened. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The demon sovereign sat down on the steps of the high platform, patted the space beside her, and motioned for Shen Li to come over. With her head lowered, Shen Li walked over and sat down. The demon sovereign patted her head. "Since you were a child, you have been practicing magic and spiritual force with me. Everything that I taught you were spells that can overcome the power of the demon beast in your body. Like your mother, I was also just as afraid. If one day, outsiders knew your identity, would they hate you? However, every day, you were growing up and living so brilliantly. Then I had second thoughts. You have the right to know about your own background. When the scorpion-tailed fox escaped from the ruins of heavenly poles, I didn't want you to go, but at the same time I wanted you to go. Then I found out that you had been to the ruins of heavenly poles where the miasma leaked out, but you weren't contaminated by the miasma. I thought to myself that you have excellent self-control and that it was time. So, I returned the Azure Sky Oceanic Pearl to you. After returning it to you, I have been afraid all the time. If you become an unfamiliar Shen Li, then what should I do?" "Master," Shen Li said, "giving birth to me was kindness, raising me was also kindness. How could Shen Li forget your kindness for your upbringing overnight? No matter what my background is, Shen Li is Shen Li. It has nothing to do with my identity." The demon sovereign patted her head quietly for a while, and then said, "Fu Xing and the others are probably the remnants of Lu Ming's faction. After 1,000 years of recuperation, they are finally making a comeback. The matter about Mo Fang, he should be the child born from Lu Ming's concubine. I know that friendship is very important to you, but since he has already betrayed you, you can no longer be merciful to him when you see him on the battlefield." Shen Li recalled that day when Mo Fang rescued her from that hut, but the feeling of hesitation only flashed in her mind momentarily. She nodded and replied, "Ali understands." Additionally, the divine sovereign Xingji and you, the demon sovereign, paused, noticing the slight stiffness in Shen Li's body. Then she released a sigh. For the past 1,000 years, I have been grateful to the divine sovereign for saving the demon realm from extreme misery. He proposed that Rongjun should marry you. Back then, I didn't know what he wanted to do. Until this time, the situation where Rongjun's powers exploded and purified all the plants in his courtyard circulated down to the demon realm. Only then did I know that Rongjun had this ability. If you marry him, you will surely be purified by his immortal powers every day, and the demonic aura in your body will completely dissipate. Although the divine sovereign Xingji may not know your true identity at that time, he may be aware of your powers to some extent. He is the divine sovereign. His responsibilities are just too great. If one day he knows about your true identity, I'm afraid he will kill you for all living beings. The demon sovereign's tone was very serious. Shen Li just quietly looked down at the ground. I think he probably knows about it already. For a moment, the demon sovereign was stunned. Shen Li continued to say, back then, the mortal that I fell in love with, Xingyun, was his reincarnation in the mortal realm. At that time, Meng Po's decoction washed away all the cultivation in his body, but did not wash away his memory of being a deity. And in that lifetime, before I followed you back to the demon realm, in order to save his life, I gave him 500 years of my cultivation. Shen Li smiled. No matter how the demon beast's powers are removed, there will still be some aura retained in the body. He should have known it by then. While he was in the demon realm, he took her with him wherever he went to reconstruct the seals. At that time, maybe he had the intention to kill her, but in the end he could not do it. Shen Li suddenly realized that at that time, Xingji had begun to act a little differently from his usual self. He was no longer the indifferent divine sovereign, who had only the lives of all beings in his heart. So during that time, he kept his distance from her, neither too close nor too far. So Xingji, even he could be shaken in that manner,